channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Six o'clock on the dot. A very good morning to you. Monday, the 11th of September. You're tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
22 years on from the attack that changed the world. We look back on September the 11th and we learn that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever.
An inmate is stabbed at HMP Wandsworth just days after the terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped from prison. So we're asking this morning, is the system fit for purpose?
As the Prime Minister returns from the G20 in India, more details come out about the Westminster staff accused of spying for China. Our political correspondent Catherine Foster with more.
Yes, the Prime Minister walked back into Downing Street during the night and straight into a huge row about the influence of China. I'll bring you the latest.
And we'll have your full weather picture with Rachel Ayres.
After a very warm to hot weekend, what can we expect from the weather as we go into the new week? Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
And with us throughout the morning with all the latest from the world of sport, Paul Coit.
Yeah, morning. 24 Grand Slams now for Novak Djokovic, so he's won the US Open. Wales managed to get past Fiji in the World Cup last night, and also, guess what? Luis Rubiales finally has quit as the president of the Spanish Football Federation. Didn't take long, did it?
No, it did not. It did not. Paul, with us throughout the programme this morning.
And as always, we want to hear from you throughout the programme. Get in touch the usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Today is September the 11th, 22 years since the world changed forever. Nearly 3,000 people killed in the space of 90 minutes.
Well, the senior security experts have told GB News that large terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS could re-emerge as significant threats to the UK. Authorities are currently tracking around 800 live terror investigations.
Well, our Homeland Security editor, Mark White, will bring you this exclusive investigation.
It was a brutal and shocking attack, heralding a new era of international terrorism, where groups like Al-Qaeda and then ISIS chose often soft targets in western cities, crowded places to cause maximum carnage. But in the 22 years since 9/11, those big organised terror groups have been severely degraded by concerted action from coalition armed forces and security services. Intelligence analysts over there at MI5 are constantly scanning the horizon for new threats. They are out there. Al-Qaeda, ISIS and associated groups are greatly diminished these days, but they could easily re-emerge. The terror groups are now scattered around multiple countries in the Middle East, Africa and Asia, and continue to launch more localised attacks. But extremism experts warn they could become a potent threat to the West again, as governments focus more on state threats from Russia, China and Iran.
I think the big fear has to be that if that pressure is lifted off, things might regress. And if we look at the underlying problems that sort of led to the emergence of a group like Al-Qaeda, that led to the emergence of a group like ISIS, that led to the rise of the sort of extreme right wing as a terrorist problem, around the world really, none of those problems have really been resolved, and a lot of them are still bubbling below the surface.
For now, the predominant threat is from lone individuals radicalised by the propaganda arms of both Islamist and right-wing extremist groups. But with increasing ungoverned spaces in a number of countries, there is real concern that those more organised groups could once again flourish.
That's what they're really concerned about. Areas of Afghanistan, say, that don't have much rule of law over them, pockets of Syria, bits of North Africa where they might reinstate themselves. And make no mistake, that jihadi philosophy, that jihadi theories, the aim to create a jihadi state is still there amongst certain individuals.
UK authorities have told GB News they are currently pursuing around 800 live terror investigations. The majority relate to lone individuals, but also to more organised plots and threats from state actors. More than 2 decades after 9/11, the threat is far more diverse than it's ever been. Mark White, GB News.
Now let's speak to someone who was there on that day and thankfully survived. His name's Sujo John, and he worked on the 81st floor of Tower 1. And the thing, Sujo, is your wife, Mary, was in Tower 2, the 71st floor. You were at work when all of this happened. Your wife hadn't got to the office yet, as I understand. Bring us back to that day and around the time of 8:45 and what happened.
Well, a happy good morning to all of you. It's hard to believe that it's 22 years. For those of us who went through that tragedy, we live out that day almost every day in our minds. And so firstly, it's hard to believe that it's 22 years. Secondly, you talked about almost 3,000 people dying. But the fact of the matter is, post 9/11, whether it's the war on terror, thousands more of American and NATO troops have died in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I look at the whole death toll of 9/11, I kind of also think of those brave men and women who died fighting this evil. And then in the United States, post 9/11, we have had at least 3,000 to 4,000 more people die who are either firefighters or policemen or survivors who inhale the toxic stuff. So the death toll and the suffering continues. There are many more people who are very ill because of what they inhaled that day. So my thoughts are about those people today who lost loved ones, who didn't go to war, but never got to go back home that day.
How on earth did you make it from the 81st floor to ground level?
So we started fighting our way to the fire down the stairwell, and we came down 81 floors. And it took more than an hour and 20 minutes. It felt like eternity. And for me, my thoughts were about my wife, who was in the other tower. In fact, she was 4 months pregnant at that time with our oldest, who's now 21 years of age. So 3 lives were spared that day.
What about your life since? I'm sure you can't go through something like that without thinking about it a lot. Do you feel blessed? Do you feel lucky? Do you feel cursed? What is your take on having been a survivor?
My life has changed in ways that I never quite would have imagined before 9/11. Firstly, my story was covered by media all over the world, and I kind of launched into, more of as a motivational speaker, but primarily talking about my faith. My faith became a very important part of who I am. When I talk about faith, my faith in Jesus Christ, and the story became a tool for me to share my faith. But I also started a nonprofit, which is called You Can Free Us, which fights modern slavery around the world. Just the way I was rescued that day, we get an opportunity to rescue women and children who are trapped in human trafficking. And since the war started in Ukraine, we've been able to be involved in Ukraine. I've been in and out of Ukraine since the war started, and we've been running relief work. So in a way, my heart is drawn to hotspots around the world, wherever there is evil. I want to make sure that there is some good, because good will always triumph evil if people like you and I will step up and will not allow the evil of our times to rule the day.
Well, Suju, you then started a global human rights organization following all that you'd been through. When you look back and reflect, are you one of these people who is a conspiracy theorist as to who attacked the towers or how they were allowed to be attacked?
Two great question. Both of them are, in a way, I would like to separate it. First of all, I have no doubt that it was a terrorist attack. And so I don't believe the conspiracy theories that says it was not a terrorist attack. I absolutely believe that. But I also understand that we now live in a time where it's very difficult to trust our government, especially in a post-COVID world. It's very alarming now that we see, whether it's in the UK or in the United States, there's the less interest to fight this radical Islamist powers. And they just need to get it right once, and we just need to get it wrong once. And so there's a great danger of the Western thought, the Western philosophies that could be under attack, whether it's a lone attacker somewhere or if it's a concerted effort. And like I said, they just need to get it right once, and we need to get it wrong once.
Well, 22 years ago it was, and it's like yesterday for so many of us. Lovely to see you. I'm sure this memory today just will stay with you forever. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning here in GB News.
Thank you so much, sir. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Now, in other news this morning, Daniel Khalif has been charged with escaping custody after 4 days on the run from authorities.
The 21-year-old escaped terror suspect had strapped himself underneath a lorry to escape from Wandsworth Prison. That was last Wednesday. He's going to appear at Westminster Magistrates today. It all comes as an inmate is stabbed at Wandsworth yesterday. Let's go to Norman Brennan, who's a retired Metropolitan Police officer.
Good morning to you, Norman. Look, this has been an embarrassing few days for the government. And yes, he was found in a relatively quick time. But of course, this shines a light on the fitness, really, doesn't it, of our prisons?
Well, sadly it does, and I'm here representing Protect the Protectors, which is a lead independent voice on British policing, and also I look after victims of crime, particularly those affected by homicide, gun and knife crime. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the attacks within prisons we rarely hear about. We've heard about this one because, of course, Wandsworth Prison's in the headlines, but there's some 21,000 assaults in prisons every year. Many of them are very serious assaults. I understand that 322 were stabbings, which are a bladed instrument or implement that they've designed and made themselves, because of course knives are pretty difficult to get hold of. And as worrying is there's 7,500 assaults on prison officers. 699 were very serious assaults. That is how dangerous our prisons are, and it's prison officers, just like police officers trying to keep the streets of Britain safe, that have become the Aunt Sallys of the prison service. Many of them are assaulted, and just like policing now, are forced to leave the job because of these assaults. And don't forget who we got in prisons. They're very dangerous people. They're bad people. That's why they've ended up there in the first place. So they're more likely to attack other prisoners and prison officers than many other people on the streets attack the police.
I suppose a lot of people will be thinking, you know, what's the solution to all of this? How do we fix it? I mean, lots of people making the comment that, you know, blocking the door after the horse has bolted doesn't really solve it. Moving these 40 prisoners out of HMP Wandsworth, does that address the issue, or does it create issues in other prisons that are already overcrowded?
I think Norman may have had difficulty picking that up. Are you still there, Norman? No, obviously he is not. Just do want to say to you as well, I mean, whether it's Wandsworth prison situation and the theory is that there are just not enough trained prison officers there to look after. Apparently, the prisoners are more experienced than the prison officers with what goes on inside jail and whatever. Give us your view on that. Also, 22nd anniversary of 9/11. Where were you? Do you remember it? I remember distinctly where I was, and honestly thinking when the airplane crashes were happening, the towers were blowing up, that this was some sort of outside Russian, Chinese, whatever strike, terrorist strike, and that this was basically going to be the end of the world.
And it's hard, you know, when you look back on where we've come since then, there's been so many crises, so many of these incidents, we've almost become used to it. But this was the first, and it was so shocking. I was in South Africa at the time, and I remember thinking, are we going to be able to get home? I was worried about my boyfriend who's back in the UK. I thought that he was going to be conscripted or something. Honestly, I thought World War III was going to break out. But where were you when 9/11 happened?
And also,
you know, do you feel like we're in a safer place?
My family, I mean, I was in London, my family were in Belfast, and I remember thinking that it would be safer to be in Belfast or Darlington or Aberdeen or whatever than it would be to be in London, and you thought these were going to be major strikes on big cities around the world. Scary, scary times. The time is now 40 minutes past 6. Here's a reminder of the top stories.
Well, as we were just discussing, 22 years on from the attack that changed the world, we're looking back on September the 11th here at GB News, and we're learning that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever, with 800 live terror investigations ongoing.
An inmate has been stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped. The question we're asking, is our prison system fit for purpose?
And as the Prime Minister returns from the G20 summit in India, more details come out about the Westminster staffers alleged to be spying for China.
The big story this morning, front page of the Star, is they're calling it the Great British Bunk-Off, right? So the weather is going to be good today, but millions of workers are ditching the office today.
Are you one of them? Fess up, let us know. Are you calling in sick today so that you can toast in the sun for one last time before winter arrives?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does anybody work in this country? You know, if they don't want bank holidays, time off for this, that, whatever, working from home, whatever, any excuse at all. Then they said the weekend was going to be good. It was hot, very, very hot. I didn't see any sunshine.
It was sunny on Saturday, very overcast on Sunday. But we've got to enjoy it while it lasts, because, you know what, it'll be gone before you know it.
Here's Rachel Ayres.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies though across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Stay with us. We are joined in the studio by a former KGB spy.
Yeah, they're going to be giving us an insight into how spies operate and how vulnerable we are to external threats, more vulnerable than ever, by all accounts.
You're watching Breakfast here on GB News, Britain's news channel. What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very warm welcome back. Rishi Sunak raised concerns over China's apparent interference in British democracy with his opposite number at the G20 after the arrest of the parliamentary researcher who was arrested on suspicion of spying for Beijing. He leaves India armed with hopes now, the Prime Minister, of a stronger global alliance.
Well, despite fears that the allegations might undermine the Prime Minister's bid for more dialogue with China, their Prime Minister thinks that the two sides should properly handle their differences.
Well, joining us in the studio is Catherine Forster, GB News' political correspondent. Good morning to you, Catherine. I mean, this is not what the Prime Minister wanted to be talking about at the G20, surely?
No, it's really not. He had an awful week last week at home with the escaped prisoner. He went to the G20 hoping to smooth the waters. I think largely, yes, it was successful, but this, absolutely the last thing he needed. The revelations yesterday that a parliamentary researcher had been arrested back in March, suspected of spying on behalf of the Chinese state. And of course, the Conservative Party, there's lots of disagreement on how to handle China. During the leadership campaign, Rishi Sunak said China was a threat. And then recently he softened his language, said it was an epoch-defining challenge. Now, he said he's made it very clear to the Chinese Prime Minister, of course, President Xi was not there, that this is unacceptable behaviour. But he can say that all he likes. You know, are they really going to listen? We know that China do not operate in the same way as Western democratic nations. So he's come back overnight, and this big row at security in Parliament, and particularly the influence that China has and our relationship with them. It's only a couple of weeks that the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, visited. That was the first sort of visit like that for 5 years. He came in for a lot of criticism.
Well, the Prime Minister, I suppose, is taking what he would see as a pragmatic approach. They've got the potential to be big economic partners, and he wants to nurture that relationship, if he can, in a safe way. But we're hearing that these arrests were back in March. Why have they only come to light now? And a lot of Tory MPs will be very concerned that they were kept in the dark about this, especially given all the concerns about China, trying to undermine kind of liberal Western democracy, rules-based order.
It's a long time, isn't it, from March until now, and there's many Conservative MPs who were already extremely concerned about the influence of China and Rishi Sunak and the government's attitude towards them. This is only going to strengthen that. And so, you know, people like Ian Duncan Smith have been saying for a long time we need to be much, much tougher. People like Alicia Cairns, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Now, she's one of the MPs that this researcher had allegedly worked in the office of, the other one being Tom Tugendhat, the security minister, though worth saying this parliamentary researcher was not working for him when he became security minister. Both of them say that they never actually met this chap. But real questions about parliamentary security. The suggestion is not that this person was sort of stealing secrets, but rather trying to influence MPs, get influence by being there in the middle. So it's a very difficult balancing act, isn't it? Rishi Sunak is trying to find the sort of Goldilocks spot with China. Obviously, we've got huge links with them. They've invested vast amounts of money here and around the world. We do a lot of business with them. But the way that they operate leaves a lot to be desired.
At what price? Catherine Forster, for your analysis, thank you.
I tell you what, you couldn't spot spies. I could, actually. He looks like a spy. you just sort of that unassuming.
You know why? It's because I'm shifty. That's what it is. It's because I'm shifty.
People just wouldn't suspect that.
No, they wouldn't have a clue.
Why are you here anyway? I don't have a clue.
You know what? I'll either talk about spies or I'll talk about sport. But then again, we've done a little spy, so maybe we should talk a little bit about sport. Novak Djokovic?
Novak Djokovic.
Wow, what a record.
It's unbelievable. 24th Grand Slam. It's his 4th US Open. There's no stopping this guy. And as much as we've often discussed him and thinking, oh, we do love Federer because he was nicer, there's no questioning that Novak Djokovic, I think, is the greatest tennis player that there's ever lived.
You think so?
I really do think so. Because if you look at Margaret Court, who had the record, which is 24, you know, Australian tennis player, we're looking back in the 60s and early 70s. The competition wasn't there. You can't really compare the game to how it is today. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. He beat Daniil Medvedev last night. The second, I mean, it was in straight sets. It sounds like it was easy, but it wasn't. It was much harder than it actually seems on paper. The second set, 104 minutes. The actual second set went longer than all of their first round games. So, anyway, he wins again. 3rd out of 4.
You know, so how close is he to retirement, hanging up his racket?
I think he'll go on forever.
He's only 36, isn't he? I was thinking he's kind of old, but not. You know, he's still got something in the tank. How old was Federer when he retired?
I think the same age, or around the same age. Yeah. And also we've got Andy Murray, of course, is around the same age. He's not going to win a Grand Slam. We know that. But as far as Djokovic is concerned, you know, there's plenty of in that tank. I mean, it's going to go on forever.
My point was going to be, when you are used to winning, being a machine like that, how on earth do you do without that fix, without that drug?
Exactly. But that's Andy Murray all over again. Yeah. That's what you used to. That's what you've played since you were a small boy. You win, you win, you win. What happens afterwards? But at the moment, he's still the best there is, so there's no reason he should be
right, at the Spanish FA, so our friend...
retiring,
Rubiales, he's now decided, for whatever reason, to step down. He hasn't stepped down yet. He said he will step down.
He will. I don't know why. It's like when people go, we're going to get engaged in 2 years' time. It's like you're either engaged or you're not. So you're either stepping down or you're not. So as far as he's concerned, he says he is going to step down. It's probably the fact that it's now like a criminal case is now moving around this. No Spanish players will play for him. FIFA have stepped away from him. Nobody wants anything to do with him. But still, for some reason, I think it's his arrogance that's kept him in the job. He apologised on the second day. This is after the Hermoso kiss, of course, after Spain won the World Cup, where he kissed her full on the lips. Then the next day he said, I apologise to anybody who was offended. If he'd have gone straight for the start and said, look, it was in the heat of the moment, I'm so sorry, I know it was wrong, maybe he would have survived, maybe not. But certainly his arrogance has managed to move him out of this.
Rugby World Cup, worth a mention.
Absolutely.
Wales last night. I went to bed before the end of the game, and I have to say, very happy husband this morning.
Was this shouting? We've been kept away. It's bad enough when you're dealing with the heat, and then a shouting husband with the rugby. Played Fiji last night, and Fiji, who beat England only recently, although England now obviously favourites for the World Cup after winning one game. But Wales managed to come through. There was a very, very worrying time the last 15 minutes because Fiji then started scoring tries. And if it wasn't for a drop ball, they could have actually beaten Wales. But Wales are through. It's only Scotland that got beaten as far as the home nations are concerned. But it was South Africa. So there you go. Long way to go yet.
I heard my wife ranting about, what is this? Instead of Coronation Street. So I think the rugby was on instead of Coronation Street.
It's such a shame it's on ITV. They're really doing a Horlicks of the coverage of the Rugby World Cup.
Did they?
And none of the replays of the action that you want to see. The commentators, you can tell, are frustrated. My father, my brother and my husband, all weekend I was hearing, this is the worst commentary.
Really?
Really bad.
Well, they'll be getting the feed, though, from French television,
I think it's
won't
coming
they?
from somewhere else.
Yeah.
You can tell it's disconnected.
Listen, I've always said this, and I don't, just blame the French. It's always the easiest way to go. You know what I mean? If there's any problem,
don't
just
do
blame
that.
the
They'll
French.
go on strike.
I think so, yeah.
Paul, going to be back in an hour's time. We've got more sport to talk about. For the moment, thank you very much indeed.
Stay with us. Still to come, as Britain's high streets turn into looting grounds for shoplifters, we're going to debate, do we need a Royal Commission review into our town centres? That's up next when you're watching GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
.30 is the time. It's the 11th of September. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster here on GB News.
Let's bring you up to date with some of the top stories this morning. And 22 years on from the attack that changed the world, we look back on September the 11th and learn that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever.
An inmate has been stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped from the prison. Do you think our prison system is fit for purpose?
And as the Prime Minister returns from the G20 summit in India, more details come out about the Westminster staffers alleged to be spying for China.
And you can have your say. People have been having their say. What are they saying, Isabel?
Well,
what are
lots
they
of people
talking
coming
about
in
today?
with memories of where they were when the attack happened. People saying, I was at home. This is from Yvonne Tierney-Neve. I was at home having been in hospital. I wasn't aware at the time of 9/11. I remember switching the TV on, flicking through the channels, and I saw it happening, but actually thought it was a film. And other people saying that they remember it. Their daughter had failed their driving test, and they were upset about that. I was working, says Shirley, on Lakenheath US Air Force Base and married to an Air Force personnel. The news was devastating and we were locked in and put on high alert. Everyone wanted to check on families and couldn't.
Yeah.
We will never forget that day. So many people saying the same thing.
I remember being in London and it was frightening. It just was, you felt, what's going to happen next? There were just so many things going off and nobody was able to confirm if this was true or that was true or whatever. Your memories, we revisit 9/11 and you can join in any of the discussions by getting in touch there. Isabel has got all those emails, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
OK, let's take a look at our newspaper front pages on this Monday morning. And here's the Daily Mail. It's leading with, after researcher is arrested for spying, Rishi confronts Chinese PM while MPs condemn it.
Let's have a look at the Mirror. Terror on the streets, new dog attack, chaos makes the Home Secretary take action on this one. I want to talk about this throughout the programme. Is it bad dogs, bad owners? Are there certain breeds that are just, you know, trained to do bad things?
And we have a debate on that, don't we? 7:25, something like that. Let us know your views and we'll get a hot debate around the whole topic there. Here's the Express leading with our very own Alistair Stewart's revelation that he's suffering with early dementia. Really brave and tearful interview yesterday here on GB News with the excellent Camilla Tominey. And we wish Alistair all the very best, of course.
And the Star goes on the weather situation. They're calling it the Great British Bunk Off, though, because millions apparently are going to skip work today as the heat wave continues over Britain. But Claire Purcell and Christopher Biggins are not bunking work today. Well, Claire's definitely not. Biggins is dressed as if he's about to...
They might be going somewhere sunny afterwards.
I mean, you can see the temptation, Christopher, can you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's... We've had such a bad summer. So any bit of sun now is just fabulous. I mean, you just want to get out there.
But it's not sunny. Eamonn was making the point. It's hot and it's muggy and the air is thick and you do anything and it's sweaty, but it's not, you know, lovely sort of Mediterranean dry sun, is it?
No, but it's better than it has been.
True, it's better than nothing.
And I, you know, those sleepless nights are coming again, which is awful. I mean, we've got a huge fan above our bed.
And who is he or she? Let me ask you this.
It's you and Eamonn, it's you.
If only. Biggins, let me ask you this. Being an actor and going through a hot day, and then knowing you've got to go to theatre that night, and a lot of theatres, particularly around London, they're not well air-conditioned or whatever. Is that something that you could dread?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because we went last week to probably one of the most wonderful theatres from that point of view in London, Regent's Park Open Air Theatre.
Oh.
And if you get a good night there, it's perfect. I mean, you know, it can be hot, but there's somehow a magical occasion that happens. We went to see Le Cage au Fall, which was brilliant. And it was just wonderful because the evening was gorgeous. You know, one was having some rosé wine, and it was a good feeling. I agree with you, some of the theatres in London are hideous.
But to work in, to get yourself
it's terrible. It's terrible. You know, you put the costume on and it may be...
You don't even understand what you've got to go through to suffer for your art.
Nobody does.
But anyway,
and this is really sad.
If you're bunking off work, we'll keep you anonymous. Just tell us your story. Claire, let's talk about Morocco first of all, which is it's just awful. It's just awful. Anybody that's travelled to Marrakesh and knows how beautiful it is in the Atlas Mountains and all that sort of thing. But it would really frighten me off about ever going back.
And I think that's what we've seen this summer, a number of big events like this. But this is their worst earthquake for 120 years. It registered at 6.8 magnitude. It was just southwest of Marrakesh itself. And, of course, it hit all of those small villages up in towards the Atlas Mountains where help is going to be very, very hard to get. And I think it's heartbreaking. Such a beautiful city, as you say. I mean, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for some of it.
But the construction will not be of the same standard as you would expect in many cities and things.
It's a 12th century built city. It is going to be crumbling, and you can see that all of the pictures across most of the newspapers will have the massive cracks in buildings. There's a tower of a mosque which is looking like it's going to fall any second, but people have lost their homes. So I don't think we need to look at the effect on the tourists because they can go home, but the architecture that is now lost, the city walls in Marrakesh which are falling down.
But I heard so many stories about people who worked in Marrakesh, was about 50 kilometres away from the epicentre, and they couldn't get communication with their families in the Atlas Mountains, and they head across blocked roads and whatever, and they get out to their family home just to simply pull their relatives' dead bodies from under the rubble.
And that has echoes of what happened in Turkey earlier in the year. And to have two of these earthquakes right on our doorstep, really, here in Europe, of this magnitude.
I didn't even know there was a fault line between Europe and Africa.
Well, it's just we're in the zone now. Here we are, Monday morning. This happened 11 o'clock Friday night, where, to be honest, if there were people trapped, it's life or death now for people. And they just don't have the resources there to try and retrieve many who will be dying in the worst possible way. It's a horror story. Pleased to say British supporters heading that way today. British Red Cross very much involved as well. And we're sending, I think, 60 search and rescue operators as well. But
it is absolutely tragic. And the story you mentioned about that man who went to rescue his family, it took him days. He walked 11 miles because there was no transport. He couldn't get through. And then to find, first thing he found was his father's leg.
Yeah.
And, it must be so traumatic.
Awful.
For the families there. It must
be
just awful.
I think sometimes, Christopher, I look at other stories and things that are going to be important to us, but they're first world problems. We're not facing things like this. I mean, I want to bring you on to this Royal Commission for High Streets. This is front page of the Daily Telegraph, talking about a Royal Commission is needed if we're to save the high streets. I mean, I don't think there's any will to save the high streets at all. I say that. I'm quite disheartened about the whole thing. I just think local authorities, whoever, let them go to rack and ruin. And when you see shops like, is it Wilko?
Yeah, Wilko.
Closing up, and what are they replaced by? Woolworths, what is it replaced by? HMV, what are they replaced by? We've had the glory days of the high street, probably in the 80s or whatever. But what way do you see this story?
Well, Neil and myself, my partner, we travel around England, and the first thing we say whenever we get anywhere, look, another shop closed, and there are hundreds on the high street, and it's soul destroying. And now, I mean, John Lewis's, I think they're in real trouble because I remember going to John Lewis's all the time, but unfortunately, we can now order things.
Yeah.
And they come sometimes the day you order it, if not the day after. It is so convenient, which is awful.
Yeah.
Because we are causing the downfall of that.
And the thing is, Claire, I don't think this is just about commerce. It's not just about business and people making money. We're going to realise too late that a high street is about community, and it's about people mixing, and it's about tackling loneliness and tackling depression and whatever. I mean, to walk down, I'll say this, if I walk down my high street, people will say hello to me, they'll pull me into shop, they'll talk to me, there'll be people you didn't even know you knew, and socialisation is going to go.
And that's right. And for most people, that is their hub. That is where they've always shopped. Their families have shopped there. People know you from growing up in a certain area, and you're going to miss that. And for some people, some elderly people, or some people who are vulnerable with mental health issues, it is their only contact with an individual is if they go into a newspaper shop or they go into a local butcher's, for example. That could be the only person they speak to that day, and we lose that. And it's a really, really sad state of affairs. But I think Biggins is right. We have all contributed to this with online shopping. So the downfall of the high street is not just at local authorities, and there is some blame there with parking charges, with rent increases and all of the rest of it. But we all play a part in this too. And I think that we need to look at what we do with the infrastructure you have on a high street. And I know that in my local area, we're opening up sort of warm spaces and community hubs. And there's a brilliant men's community hub that has started up, specifically because they had no space to go and talk to anybody. So a men's club has started up to give those guys the space that they can just go and talk without having to worry about it. And I think that we may see more of that kind of thing come up, but it does rely upon councils not charging the earth for the use of a building.
I want to talk about this devil dog story. It's on the front of The Sun this morning. And I don't know if you saw the footage over the weekend where you could hear the little girl screaming and then the footage of the dog running across and attacking the man. Home Secretary saying she wants to outlaw these dogs, Claire. I mean, there are certain breeds that when I see them, I do feel frightened and I do sometimes cross out of the way, especially as I have kids who love dogs and, you know, just gravitate towards them. It's very difficult to navigate as a parent. But you know, is this the fault of the dog or the owners, and is banning them the answer?
It's like having a car like a Fiat 500 or whatever, and having something that is a
that's what we've got.
A part what?
A Fiat 500.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, which is nice and tame,
yes.
and whatever, or some beast of a power.
Oh, I see
car.
what you mean.
Yes. The monsters. So there's no need for it. I mean, these dogs are bred to fight, bred to kill, and what Isabel was saying, if one of her children go over and pet a dog, we're not going to say it bites, but if it does bite, no human is going to be able to part their jaws and get their
kids
jaws.
Squeal when they say, "Ooh," and that excites the dog. And
yes,
I mean, look, I have to take responsibility for my children, but you know, this girl sounds like she was just minding her own business.
It was horrific. The video footage was absolutely horrendous. And the majority of the time, it is deed, not breed, that you need to worry about.
Nice line.
However, you've got the rise of these crossbreed dogs,
Yeah.
which the Kennel Club doesn't see as a breed itself, and it is a mutation. People have put this fighting machine together, if you like. They are frightening. They are bred to fight, they are bred to defend. Their jaws are 4 times more powerful than perhaps they would be in a normal sort of bulldog-type breed. So I think that we need to look very, very carefully at these. I'm normally not in favour of banning things, but I think that this is out of control.
Listen, I tell you, if you go to Instagram and you log on to and you start following people who have dog websites and things like this, you will see that there is probably no more loving animal on the planet than a dog. And why? I mean, we could do this with humans. They're breeding abominations, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
Well, people are doing dog fights still, which I find...
Of course.
That's absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
How can that be happening?
OK, hold that thought. We'll be back with you guys shortly. A reminder of the top stories with the time just 6:45.
So 22 years on from the attack that changed the world, we look back on September the 11th, and GB News has learned that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever.
An inmate has been stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped. So the question being asked, is our prison system fit for purpose?
And as the Prime Minister returns from the G20 summit in India, more details come out about the Westminster staff as alleged to be spying for China.
This spying situation, we're going to talk to a guest very, very shortly, an espionage expert and a former KGB intelligence officer with all of this. But Claire, just a quick word about if Westminster has been infiltrated, why is this of so much use to countries like the Chinese?
It's always going to be of interest to countries like China. You want to know what conversations are being had, which individuals are having conversations about China. It doesn't need to be necessarily secret, eyes-only information. It could just be little bits of intelligence, and that generally is what spying is.
Like, is their marriage happy? Are they in financial trouble? So they're under influence. Right.
It's all of the soft information.
Here's Alexander Vasiliev, as I say, espionage expert, former KGB intelligence officer. Alexander, thanks for talking to us today. What way would a parliamentary spy operate? What are they looking for? Why are they so valuable to countries like China and Russia?
Well, a researcher, for instance, in the British Parliament could be used in at least 3 ways. First, to acquire sensitive information, because I believe that researchers can request information from different government departments like Defense, Foreign Office, Treasury, and so on. It's one way. Another way is to make an impact, an influence on political views of members of parliament, to promote ideas beneficial, for instance, in this case, beneficial to China. And the third way, such a person could work as a talent spotter. Talent spotter means that he would be collecting personal information about members of parliament and members of the staff. For instance, their political views, their financial situation, their family relations, and so on. So it's a pretty good source to have as a researcher in the parliament.
It's interesting. We're seeing what appears to be kind of the rise of spying again. I mean, we had the National, I think, Official Secrets Act being used to arrest 3 Serbians earlier this year who were alleged to have been spying for Russia. And now these 2 arrests in Parliament. Why are we seeing this increase? And particularly with China, I suppose they've had these 3 decades, haven't they, of huge economic growth. Now their economy's stalling. Are they looking to try and destabilise Western democracies in this way? What's the motive?
Now, look, Britain is a liberal democracy, and it's more vulnerable to espionage threats, more vulnerable than countries like Russia or China. And there is another factor. In the KGB lingo, it's called agent operational environment, агентурная оперативная обстановка, agent operational environment. It means a combination of factors which facilitates espionage work in this country. And from that point of view, Britain is in a pretty bad shape. I can give you an example. In 2016, I was shocked by the results of the Brexit referendum. I was shocked by the fact that 48% of the voters voted against Brexit. To me, Brexit is a very simple idea. It's about Britain's sovereignty. It's about Britain being ruled by British politicians, democratically elected by British people. But if 48% believe that Britain should be ruled by someone else, by people who they don't even know, it's a bad sign. But I mean, I'm not saying that all 48% are potential spies or traitors, but as an intelligence officer, I would pay attention to this how person I'm talking to feels about Brexit, and if he is a Remainer, I would make a note in my head and then in my files.
Gosh, that's interesting, because of course Russia's been accused, haven't they, in being involved in some ways in that vote, and obviously your position as a Russian, fascinating and all this. I mean, how do you end up being a former KGB intelligence officer? Perhaps you always remain one.
Well, no, well, are you asking, am I a KGB spy now?
I don't know.
Once a spy, always a spy.
Well, no, it's actually not true. Look, it's different. It's difficult to tell a spy because espionage is about human relationship. It's about relationship between an officer and his agent, his source. So basically, spies are first and foremost they are trained to be nice people. I spent 2 years in the KGB spy school being trained as a Mr. Nice, and I'm sure you can see the result.
Excellent training.
But then pay attention when they're trying to get sensitive personal information about you, about your financial situation and about your political views. Like I said, for instance, about Brexit.
Yeah.
It's a very important thing, your attitude towards Brexit. And also, of course, money.
And Alexander, I suppose the less obvious a spy is, whatever we think a spy looks like, the better. Because there was that couple who were Bulgarian or Romanian or whatever, and they were living in suburbia, and no one ever thought anything of them. So sometimes they can be innocent, they can be innocuous, and the less like a spy they are, probably the more effective they are.
Yes, look, spies on the surface are normal, nice people. You know, you could be a spy easily. both of you. You could be a nice spy couple. Well, maybe you are. Well, can you prove that you are not? You can't. You can't. So they're nice people because they're trained to be nice.
Right. Alexander, thank you. Very, very interesting getting an insight from you there. Alexander Vasilyev is a former spy. That's what he used to do. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Biggins, you see, I always look at you, I think you could be a spy. You could be a spy.
I couldn't be a spy. I tell you why.
You could, because people would laugh. You make people laugh and they'd tell you anything.
No, but the thing is, that I couldn't bear being tortured.
You'd give everything up.
I would get. I mean, if they went near my nails and started to rip them off, I would tell them my life story. I would tell them everybody I've been with since the year dot. I mean, you know, it wouldn't be right.
So it's okay until he's caught.
Well, this is it. But if you're a good spy, you don't get caught. And that's got to be the way forward, hasn't it? But I think Biggins definitely, out of the four of us sitting here, I would put my money on Biggins.
But it's interesting from Alexander. Isabel raised an interesting point. How do you get out of being a spy? I mean, I don't think you can hand your... Alexander, I don't think you can hand your resignation into the Kremlin and just say, thank you, it was very nice, I've had enough now, I'm off.
Well, look, I believe I was the first one who resigned from the KGB intelligence service. It was in February 1990. I didn't know anyone else who did that. And I did that for political and moral reasons, because, you know, basically espionage is a crime. Anyone understands that. They are not stupid spies. So if you, for instance, if you operate in this country, you're not really in danger, especially if you are a diplomat. You have diplomatic immunity. But if your agent gets caught by MI5, his life is ruined, his family's life is ruined. It's a crime. So if you are prepared to do this kind of crime, you should be sure that you are doing it for some worthy cause, for your motherland, for your country. And by the time I decided to resign, I just couldn't see that. I thought I would be wasting my time doing something I didn't want to do.
And Alexander, in the 30 seconds that we've got left, you know, there's this outrage that Britain has that China is spying on them. But isn't the truth is we're all spying on each other?
Yes, we are. And of course, MI6 is one of the most experienced intelligence services. And you know, Russians, frankly, have a philosophical attitude about it, because espionage, spying is one of the oldest professions. It's like prostitution. So, you know, we are cool about it. And I don't know how the Chinese feel about it, but Russians are cool about it.
There we go.
Okay.
Spies,
thank you.
Prostitutes, all in one.
Yeah,
There's a film of that.
There is.
We want your views about how tough we should actually get with China. Will we get tough, and is it time to tell them we're not taking it anymore? We will take some of the nice weather that's coming our way today. Here's Rachel Ayres.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales, clearing skies there across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Lots coming your way at 7 o'clock. We're reflecting this morning on 22 years on from the attack that changed the world. Experts have told GB News that the terror threat remains very significant here in the UK. We'll be discussing that and the rest of the
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It's just gone 7 o'clock. It's Monday, the 11th of September. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading our news on this Monday morning.
22 years on from the attack that changed the world. As we look back on September the 11th, GB News learns that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever.
An inmate is stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after the terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped prison. Is the system fit for purpose?
MPs are calling on the government to ban low-achieving students from getting student loans. Our political correspondent Catherine Forster will tell you why.
Yes, a group of Conservative MPs think that too many people are going to university with very poor grades and that it's not worth the money. They want the money saved from funding those students to be put into apprenticeships instead. I'll bring you more in a moment.
Oh, with education, they don't know whether they're coming or going. 1 minute it's education, 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 then it's apprenticeships. That's a great idea. Funny, I think Brexit's a lot to do with this. I think when they find out they haven't got motor mechanics, hairdressers, waiting staff, whatever, suddenly everybody goes, let's have apprenticeships. You know, well, that
It does seem mad to be sending people that haven't got GCSEs in maths or English, or even have a series of E-level A grades, to university. Why?
Well, especially if you make that seem more attractive than actually going and getting a good, solid career and profession with something that's of use to people. But ask Tony Blair. He's the man. Education, education, education. Too much of it. Too much of it, I would say. Too much education.
Well, friendship isn't an education. It's a different type.
You have absolutely right. It is an education, and it is something that you can admire and you can look at and you can say to somebody, they have got a skill that very other few people possess.
Like Rachel Ayres, our weather forecast.
After a very warm to hot weekend, what can we expect from the weather as we go into the new week? Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Rachel with the weather, Paul Coit with the sport, and a very happy man there.
He is a very happy man. I'm the man with too little education, by the way, but Novak Djokovic again. So 4th US Open Championship.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? How have you too little education?
Well, you know.
Could have been better.
Could have been.
Could have done better.
I could be here for about half an hour talking about that. 4th US Open win for Novak Djokovic, 24th Grand Slam. Wales managed to get past Fiji. And guess what? Luis Rubiales finally is going to step down as president in Spain.
Not yet. Not yet.
He's coming, though, within the next couple of years, if we're lucky.
OK, all right.
Lots of you have been getting in touch this morning. Thank you for your emails. We'll reflect on those just as soon as we can and keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
So here we are. It's Monday, September the 11th, and 22 years on since the world changed forever, where nearly 3,000 people were killed in the space of 90 minutes.
Senior security experts have told GB News that large terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS could re-emerge as significant threats to the UK. Authorities are currently tracking around 800 live terror investigations.
We've got a special report now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White. It's his exclusive investigation.
It was a brutal and shocking attack, heralding a new era of international terrorism, where groups like Al-Qaeda and then ISIS chose often soft targets in Western cities, crowded places to cause maximum carnage. But in the 22 years since 9/11, those big organised terror groups have been severely degraded by concerted action from coalition armed forces and security services. Intelligence analysts over there at MI5 are constantly scanning the horizon for new threats. They are out there. Al-Qaeda, ISIS and associated groups are greatly diminished these days, but they could easily re-emerge. The terror groups are now scattered around multiple countries in the Middle East, Africa and Asia, and continue to launch more localised attacks. But extremism experts warn they could become a potent threat to the West again, as governments focus more on state threats from Russia, China and Iran.
I think the big fear has to be that if that pressure is lifted off, things might regress. And if we look at the underlying problems that sort of led to the emergence of a group like Al-Qaeda, that led to the emergence of a group like ISIS, that led to the rise of the sort of extreme right wing as a terrorist problem, around the world, really, none of those problems have really been resolved, and a lot of them are still bubbling below the surface.
For now, the predominant threat is from lone individuals radicalised by the propaganda arms of both Islamist and right-wing extremist groups. But with increasing ungoverned spaces in a number of countries, there is real concern that those more organised groups could once again flourish.
That's what they're really concerned about. Areas of Afghanistan, say, that don't have much rule of law over them, pockets of Syria, bits of North Africa where they might reinstate themselves. And make no mistake, that jihadi philosophy, that jihadi theories, the aim to create a jihadi state is still there amongst certain individuals.
UK authorities have told GB News they are currently pursuing around 800 live terror investigations. The majority relate to lone individuals, but also to more organised plots and threats from state actors. More than 2 decades after 9/11, the threat is far more diverse than it's ever been. Mark White, GB News.
Well, someone who was there. Let's get the thoughts of the chair of Republican Overseas UK, an eyewitness to what happened on the day, Greg Swenson, who's been a friend of this programme, and we didn't know, Greg, that you were subjected to all of this. Bring us back 22 years and when you knew something was really wrong.
Yeah, I was, at the time I lived in Chicago, but I was visiting New York for meetings. I was a bond trader at Lehman Brothers, so I did frequently go to New York to the headquarters. Lehman's headquarters was at 3 World Financial, also known as the American Express Tower. It's the Green Pyramid building, connected to the North Tower by Pedway, right across the street, right across West Street from the North Tower. So I was just greeting a client of mine on the 9th floor at Lehman when the first plane hit. So I had no idea what had actually happened.
Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, you definitely felt it.
What did you think, first of all?
It was hard to interpret. It was the people on the perimeter that were, right across from the North Tower, because it's an open trading floor.
Mm-hmm.
So the people on the perimeter were yelling to those of us in the center to get out, right? So I had no idea. Even when I was outside, we went down the fire escape, which was a little intense, it was only 9 floors, but it felt like 90. Watching the fire from the corner, literally across the street, staring up, watching the fire, everyone was just trying to figure out, was it a small plane? Was it just a natural gas explosion or an electric?
You weren't thinking about tower collapse at that stage.
Then when the second plane hit, that's when you knew things were bad, because
there was a pattern.
You could feel the oxygen being sucked out of the air, when the second plane hit, there's a lot of shrapnel, for lack of a better word, coming down from the tower. So that's when we had to make a move. But the first 15 minutes, I thought I was going back into the building. I was telling my client, just be patient, we'll go back in and skip the first meeting.
The thing, I always look at it and I think, I don't know how I would have coped when the buildings were collapsing, when all that dust and people were losing their breath and trying to hide from the dust clouds and things. You missed that. You were lucky you got out ahead of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. We moved when the second plane hit. That was enough. That was visible enough, and to know that this was a real problem. So we moved north, and you could see the firemen coming down West Street. It was really,
God bless them.
In retrospect, we're going north, getting away, walking 10 blocks. I had a woman with me who was a client, and I needed to get her to safety. That was the most important thing. But these firemen were loaded with gear, running down West Street into the building. It was just an awesome moment.
And Greg, we can hear from your accent that you're born and raised, you're a New Yorker.
Right.
How does that hurt? Because obviously you weren't directly affected, but you knew people in the town, not only from work, but kids you'd grown up with, going to school with.
Yeah, devastated my town. My mother coincidentally died a few weeks later. I think it was 2 weeks. There were 22 funerals ahead of her at my church. So St. Patrick's was devastated. My high school had 75 alumni and parents die, not only bond traders and bankers, but firemen and cops too. And it's just, so it really hit the neighborhoods, because these were all towns that were prone to have Wall Street people, and also firemen and cops. So it's just, that's the nature of my high school, all boys Catholic high school. So it really had a deep connection.
Being a Catholic and guilt playing such a big role in our lives, did you ever feel guilty that you survived and others didn't?
No, not really. I mean, your first motivation is to look after the people you're with. The second motivation was to get home and see my wife and my 2, baby and toddler at the time. So, once you get through that, then you start to think about all the carnage that happened. And yeah, I had a lot of friends, and both from working at Lehman Brothers, but also, going to high school nearby and college. My university was pretty hit pretty hard too.
You're still big in politics. You follow it closely. We're reporting today that the threat remains the same. There are 800 live investigations here in the UK. Yeah. Do you feel safe here in the UK? Do you still worry about it?
Maybe it's having lived through it. Not only, I was there in '93 also. Just again, bad luck. I lived in Chicago at the time, but I was at the '93 World Trade Center bombing. But I think, living in New York after 9/11, those few years, where it was, it was really elevated, and every building had a lot of armed security. And so you just got used to it. And even in Chicago with the Sears Tower, or now called Willis Tower, being, you know, such a well-known building and working across the street. So you just got used to it. I've always felt like the level of risk is higher here just because of where we are. And I think the country's had a more history of terrorism, unfortunately. And so I think that, you know, the guard is probably down in the U.S. You don't have that vibe that you did the first 5 years where everyone, you know, you'd get on a plane or a train and look around and very, very high alert level. I don't think you see that anymore.
No.
Gosh, Greg, thanks for reliving that with us, and I'm glad you feel mentally and competent about it all. And great talking to you.
Great to be here as usual.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, we're going to carry on talking about this now with Chris Phillips, who's former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Good morning to you. Just in the studio discussing how the vibe has moved on, really, from the immediate aftermath. And yet the threat remains the same. It might have changed, but the level has remained the same. Just explain how the threat has changed since then.
Yeah, well, if you want to actually go back to the 10th of September, and the threat in the US was considered quite low, and we're kind of back to that stage. We're kind of back to that stage now, really, albeit the terror threat itself from big events. I think we would say that they're much less likely than before. However, what Al-Qaeda and ISIS have done is actually say to their people, listen, go out and commit individual acts of terrorism. And I think that's the way we're facing this at the moment. And of course, we saw in Manchester an individual go off and manage to kill lots and lots of people. So the terror threat is still there. The likelihood of these big attacks is much lower than it has been, certainly post 9/11.
Nowadays, I mean, I'm particularly thinking about Irish republicanism. Has that gone off the chart now? Is that not regarded as a threat? Or what proportion of our security services are dedicated to monitoring the Irish threat?
Yeah, Eamonn, you grew up with terrorism as a daily part of your life in Northern Ireland, and to some extent that has faded, and of course Northern Ireland is now a much safer place. But there are still individuals and groups of individuals, actually, who want to continue the fight. And, you know, the UK has faced terrorism in one form or another for 100 years. And that's not likely to go away. The sad fact is that MI5 have so many things on their plate. Not only have they got the threat of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and individuals within that, you know, hundreds, thousands actually of people in the country that are of concern. But also they've got Northern Ireland, also they've got, you've been talking about the Chinese spies, that falls to them as well. All these things are a real threat to society. Loads of work goes on in the background to keep us safe. But of course, one of these can always pop up and do us some harm.
Well, Chris, hopefully there's people like you out there who will stop this. But for the moment, Chris is a former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. And I think when Chris was talking about, you know, my situation about growing up with it, I think the thing about terrorism, which is different from other forms of murder and whatever, when it's completely indiscriminate, like the Manchester Arena, or go through other Manchester bombings, shopping malls, Canary Wharf, various things that went on, Omagh, just awful. And they would think, why did you not consider who was there and do that? And that's the evilness of terrorism.
Well, we had all those bridge attacks, didn't we, here in London?
Yeah.
And
well, the thing about Irish terrorism, which was different, they weren't offering up martyrs. Nobody was going to die for the cause. Whereas with Middle Eastern terrorism, people are prepared to be suicide bombers and things.
We're talking about education next, and we'd love to get your thoughts in all of this. A few education stories doing the rounds. So let's bring in our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, to discuss this. Good morning to you. So first of all, I want to hear about these Conservative MPs who are calling for a ban on loans for low-performing students. Sounds controversial, but actually, could it make some sense?
Well, If the savings that they think this will bring are put into apprenticeships, then possibly. This is a group of about 30 Conservative MPs that came in 2017, 2019. And what they're saying is that low-achieving students who don't pass English and Maths at GCSE or don't get a minimum of 3 E's at A-level, which I think most people would think was a pretty low bar, should not be allowed to take out a student loan, because they're saying that, first of all, it's not money well spent for the taxpayer, and also it's not money well spent for the students, because very often they don't go on to earn graduate salaries. That £50,000 worth of debt on average is not worth it. So they're saying, stop those children getting the loans. There's just under 3,000 a year at the moment that go to uni with lower grades than that. Put the money that you're saving into a massive expansion of apprenticeships. Now, we've heard, haven't we, from Tony Blair onwards, education, 50% to go to university. There's a feeling now that kids are going to university without thinking if it's really the right thing, and that what we need is far more good quality apprenticeships. Like in Germany, for example, more than half of children do apprenticeships. Here it's like 10%, and they're few and far between, to be honest.
Well, we need to accept, I think, that apprenticeships are still education, just, you know, horses for courses. I want to ask you about this report that's come out to say that in London, pupils are receiving 9.7% more funding than in the north. I mean, this will just feed into the whole argument that levelling up has failed when it comes to education.
Yeah, we heard a lot about levelling up, didn't we? But this seems to be the opposite. This chair of the Child of the North group, it turns out that children in London are getting nearly 10% more per pupil, an average of 6,600, where somewhere like Yorkshire, 5,900. Now, you'd think that where children were coming from more deprived backgrounds, they would be getting more money. Obviously, they've got more challenges to overcome, but it seems to be the opposite. And this group are saying that, you know, that has a knock-on effect on public services, because they're more likely to fall behind, they're more likely to do badly at school, then end up, you know, on the criminal justice system, mental health concerns, whatever. And so I think, you know, levelling up, the slogan, but where is it really? I think a lot of people around the country still feel that London gets special treatment, and this seems to be another example of that.
Well, I suppose you should try and live in London, and I'm sure bus charges are higher, you know, all sorts of things to get around and to go to school in London is probably more expensive, so we don't really know where that money's going or what it's being used to substitute. But I do know this much, that the Egypts who run this country and who actually think that a child should be discriminated against for the rest of their life because they haven't got O-level maths or whatever it's called now at that level at 16 years of age, and therefore they should not be allowed to do something. Grand, have arithmetic, which you probably will need in your life, but you don't need maths. There's nothing in maths that you're going to need for the rest of your life. And I think it's terrible prejudice to then say you can't go to third level education. Sorry, I speak from personal experience. I don't have O-level maths, but I trained as a journalist. Why would me not having O-level maths stop me being a journalist? You know, it's absolute nonsense. They get their whole priorities wrong, and they put people in a box. They want everybody in a box. And why? You know, I just a lot of it is nonsense. I think we teach the wrong things at school. I think we should teach more about life lessons as well. And I'll go on about it again. I've got top marks in English and Shakespeare and everything, and I can appreciate it. Shakespeare is of no use to anyone. It's a discerning extra that you can have, and it's very nice as icing on top of the cake. But should you learn cooking at school instead? Should you learn how to get a mortgage, you know, business skills and whatever as well? I think we're teaching the wrong things. What do you think?
Yeah, and thank you very much, Catherine, for explaining those stories. And I think you're right. It's the debate about whether or not, you know, education is for its of itself, whether you think Shakespeare in and of itself is worth learning, or whether you think education is just purely so that you can go into the world of work. I think it should be both. That's my position. Nice tableau.
Sports stories. Paul Coit has got those for us today. And what do you want to concentrate on?
Well, probably the one that's happened most recently is going to be Novak Djokovic, who wins the US Open again. 4th time that he's won the US Open, which means 24 Grand Slams. Beat Daniil Medvedev. There he is, looks celebrating, very happy. I mean, the thing is, he's probably going to come up with something different each time. What do? Do I crawl down on the floor? Do I fake the tears? Do I look exhausted? I've done it so many times.
Well, it's interesting.
But there he goes again.
I wonder what Djokovic wanted to be when he grew up, you know, when he was a kid. I'm sure from a very young age it was nothing else but tennis.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone like him.
But with maths, I don't think the 15 all, 30, 40 would make any difference to him. What is Jewish? How does that work out? 40-40 and then it goes to advantage?
My worst nightmare was when I worked for BBC Sport. One of the first things they gave me was the World Darts Championship.
The maths in that is not fun.
And you have to do it in reverse, so it's all subtracting and whatever.
That's my nightmare.
But I've got such admiration for people who can see what the player has got to go. It needs double 17.
Treble 15, treble 20, double 18. Yeah. No, double 9. Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I tell you what I really did like, and this is Coco Gauff, who obviously won the women's title at Flushing Meadows. She won. She was great. I mean, have you seen the family? The family's names. There's Corrie. There's Coco, and her real name's Corrie, and Corrie and Candy. There's are the parents. Then there's Cody, who's one of the sons. There's a Cameron in there. The only thing missing is a Coity, isn't it? Do you think so? I could join the family. But Arina Sabalenka, who lost, who was the world #1. Now, this is really good. Now, if you're going to lose, when you go back, you have to fake the smile. You have to give the speech. We've got something here. This is actually footage from the... Have you seen this? From the dressing room after she lost. Okay. So she goes back in. She's lost against Corrie or Coco. She's given the speech. And hopefully we've got that and we can see her going back into the changing room afterwards.
No, we don't have that.
They waited until you got to the very end of that sentence and they said, we don't have that.
You're kidding me.
Instead of saying at the start of the sentence, save your agony for all of that. But it sounded very good.
You know what? I'll have it for you for the 8th.
She said, I'm dying to know.
She basically walks in. She walks into the dress. I can probably do it better than she did.
On, then.
She puts the award down. She looks around, she pulls a racket out of her bag, looks around, smashes the racket to pieces.
Did she know the camera was on her?
I doubt it very much.
I doubt it very much. Type camera.
But do you know what I love about Breakpoint, and I talk about it a lot on this programme now because I'm still watching the series, is you see the behind the scenes, walking out of Flushing Meadows. So now they're broadcasting that.
It's how they actually are allowed to have a camera in the dressing rooms is probably another question altogether. But anyway, it's terrific. We do have it for you, so I'll show you after 8 o'clock because it's the biggest fit of peak, and she's managed to hold it all in throughout, but then again smashes a racket after that.
Okie dokie, thank you. So do you tend staying for work for the rest of the day? Or are you going to bunk off as it's bunk off Britain today?
You know what? I've got to tell you, I think it's a little too hot to bunk off. You know what? I prefer to be indoors where it's a little more air-conditioned. My house is not air-conditioned. Yes. It was too hot last night. I slept for about an hour, as you can tell. Okay. So I think I'll probably... And also, I'm a very hard worker, you know that.
Of course he is.
Indeed. We all need the money. Here's Rachel Ayres telling you what the weather is.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies though across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine, though, for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, we all love doggies. Most people love doggies. You have to be something wrong with you not to love a doggie, but not all doggies love us. And is that the fault of the dog, or is that the fault of the owners? Are these sort of breeds, these sort of killer type dogs?
American Bully XLs. I mean, who even knew that was a breed? They bred to fight.
Well, the fact is, isn't this sort of title there to enhance the owner? I've not only got a dog, I've got an XL dog. You know, now the trouble is, if that dog puts its jaws around you, you ain't getting them off. That's the problem. And there's a big row about this. People are seeing them as out of control. There are clips of all of this, which we'll have for you after the break. We're going to be debating that. Is it bad owners or bad dogs? What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the time has gone 7:31.
We're just getting a breaking story coming in, a big manufacturing story. BMW are to build their next generation electric Mini in Oxford. This is because the government funded a package for them to make it much more attractive. So it's going to secure 4,000 jobs, high quality jobs, according to ministers with that one. And there we are. And the government have invested £75 million into all of this.
Yeah, it's all sort of coming off the back as well of the big news about Ellesmere Port last week, the Stellantis factory, £100 million investment there. It certainly seems as though electric vehicle manufacturing is on the up here in the UK. We'll try and reflect on that a bit more throughout the course of the morning.
Otherwise, in the news, a prisoner has been stabbed at Wandsworth just days after Daniel Khalif escaped. The man was taken to hospital in a critical condition after emergency services were called at around 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
The government's deployed 60 search and rescue specialists and 4 search dogs to Morocco as rescuers dig through the rubble to try and hunt for any survivors following the 6.8 magnitude earthquake. This comes after more than 2,100 have already lost their lives in the country's deadliest quake in 6 decades.
I'm going to show you a clip now which went viral over the weekend. This features what is called an American Bully XL dog, and it attacked a number of people. Let's have a look.
If you're listening on the radio, what you can see here is a group of people surrounding this dog, trying to wrestle the dog off somebody who had been attacked. We know that an 11-year-old girl was the first victim in this incident, and the dog then ran across to a petrol forecourt where it attacked 2 further people. There's the petrol forecourt if you're watching it on the screen.
So this is Birmingham, is it?
Horrendous. Yeah, this was in Birmingham. And it took many people. There's a man there with a broom trying to get the dog off. Very brave of the people who are trying to help. And look, that dog giving chase of this poor man who falls to his feet as he tries to escape from this American Bully XL.
And that footage being shot from inside a bus there on that situation. So dogs like that have been blamed for rises in violent attacks, and there's warnings that years of inbreeding and violent training have made the Bully XL really dangerous.
Well, the Home Secretary has weighed into this argument. She's come out, Suella Braverman, saying enough is enough. We need to ban these. It doesn't come under her job title, though. This is down to the Department for Environment and Food and Education. So we're asking this morning, what do you think? Are you with the Home Secretary on this time to ban them? Joining us this morning is Dr. Lawrence Newport. He's a legal academic who thinks we absolutely should.
And there you have Mark Riley. Mark's a volunteer at Rocky's Army who disagrees. Tell us about Rocky's Army then, Mark. Well, what is that organisation?
Yes, we're a support group for people whose dogs are seized by the police under the current legislation. Mostly dogs that are seized, not really for being out of control, but dogs that are seized as suspected banned breeds.
But why do you not think that these dogs should be banned? The case against them seems pretty strong.
Well, it's on what's been portrayed in the media. I mean, every breed is capable of being dangerously out of control, no matter what breed it is. And all we're going to do, if we ban the XL Bully, we're just adding to a list that already is not working.
Well, let's bring Dr. Lawrence Newport in all of this. I mean, surely you have to be able to distinguish between breeds. I mean, it's just a fact, isn't it, that certain breeds are bred to be gentle, to be soft, to be family animals. Certain breeds are, through, several generations and deliberate breeding, become more aggressive for fighting or whatever it might be. There is a differential, isn't there?
Yes, I mean, retrievers retrieve, pointers point, and fighting dogs fight. And these dogs were bred from fight-winning dogs in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, actually. And over time, these dogs were then bred, perhaps with larger crosses. We're not entirely sure. But if you look at their pedigrees, they are inbred over and over for larger and larger sizes. These dogs were fighting dogs, bred to fight. So we shouldn't be surprised that that is what they do.
Mark, sorry, where do you get a dog like this? I mean, you just can't go down to the local pet shop and buy it. Where do these dogs come from, these XLs? Can you hear me, Mark? Eamonn here. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, yeah. Hi, sorry, yeah.
I was just asking you how you get hold of one and what would you pay for one?
Prices vary depending on which, who the breed it is, but people mostly buy online or through other organisations, like you can with any breed. You see dogs advertised regardless of where you go, any social media, advertising in the newspapers or like the pet shops, things like that are online at the moment.
Mark, how do you think this problem should be tackled? Because if you say, it's not working just adding breeds to a banned list, what would work? Because you can't presumably think that the current situation is OK, where people are being attacked in the streets, particularly children.
Nobody being attacked in the street is acceptable, regardless, again, of what breed it is. You just try and single out one breed here, but this happens with every type of breed of dog, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, but the difference is, Mark, I may survive a bite on the ankles from a Chihuahua, but I'm not going to survive when an XL gets its teeth into my thigh.
But again, everyone's trying to blame this one breed of dog. It's not one breed of dog. You could be attacked by any big dog that could cause a lot of damage. So do you then ban anything that's taller than a Chihuahua?
OK, well, Dr. Lawrence Newport's shaking his head.
If we ban the XL bully, well, if we ban the XL bully, what next? That just another breed will come along, and do we just keep going and keep going? All they're doing here by banning breeds is put a plaster over the problem. No one is coming and dealing with what really needs to be dealt with. Better education, more training.
So the American bully has only been in the country since about 2018. It has led to the single largest amount of deaths to dogs since records began in the UK. It's responsible for over 70% of all fatalities since 2021. It's responsible for nearly 50% of all attacks. In July, there was one dog every day killed by an American bully. We've logged at least 350 or more attacks by this breed. It is not the case that it's the same as other large breeds. If you want to, for instance, look at a Great Dane, Great Danes are about 80 kilograms. They're huge. You can't find a single person killed by a Great Dane in the UK. If it was...
I have to say, the doctor talking there convinces me. That's all I need to hear. We don't need them. Why do you want them?
It's like any different breeds. People like different breeds, and you can't tell people what they can and can't like.
But you can.
Of course you can. You can't walk around with a gun in the streets just because you fancy it.
But if you ban the XL bully and another breed then is created, you also then just push scrupulous breeders, bad breeders underground where the police cannot monitor them.
OK, well, listen, Dr. Lawrence still shaking his head. We have to leave it there. Yeah. I'm pretty sure people at home will have their views on all of this morning. I have to say, I'm with you, Eamonn, and with you, Dr. Lawrence. There's absolutely no need. The clue is in the name, an XL bully, devil dog. As you say, 70% of the issues have been around at their fault. So why bother? Why have them? That's where it should be.
See, I'm
all for a ban.
When you see endangered species of animals in general throughout the world, we are wrapping up. We don't need all this now. Get rid of all this. Thank you. So basically, we don't need these animals. Why encourage them? And you look at all the species in the world that's dying out. Why are we encouraging this really weird, strange breed with this stupid name?
Well, the trouble is it also affects everybody's relationship with dogs, because now I am fearful of dogs with my children, which I wasn't actually when I was growing up. And, he made the point there, Dr. Lawrence, that Great Danes, 80-kilo dogs, never killed anybody.
Yeah, and if you show, not to be fearful of these sort of things, but you should be fearful of that, because if that sticks its teeth in you, you ain't coming back from it. It's a terrible situation.
Perhaps you at home are listening to this or watching this and you have an XL bully dog. Let us know. Try and tell us what's wonderful about them, or perhaps...
Well, don't, because we're not listening to you. Don't care.
I'm interested.
I'll tell you this. What I do believe is a dog is the most loving creature in the whole world. It is. It would melt your heart. It's man's best friend. And I've nothing but good things to say about dogs. I do have bad things to say about this weird crossbred. I don't know how else to describe it. We don't need them, really. That's it, and they're a danger to people. 90 minutes now before 8 o'clock.
Stay with us. We're going to reflect on that breaking news this morning about BMW announcing a multi-million-pound investment in the UK electric car industry. Stay with us.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Da-da-da-da-dum, etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Penny says any dog can be out of control, but a bully dog is massive and it's got a much bigger bite. Very scary. Ban any massive breed. We know the sort of person who seeks out this breed. They don't care about anyone. There's no need whatsoever for such an aggressive dog, says Michael. Ban them, round them up, and those that are in the UK and put them down before they put a human down.
We have had an email in saying that it's not about the breed, that they're absolutely lovely and we should do our research, but I'm afraid it's not our opinion, it's the opinion of the expert there saying, the legal expert, that they were responsible for the vast majority of attacks. I think it was 1 dog death a day in July at the hands of XL.
I'll personally go with the doctor's advice on that. That's just me. Now, if somebody talks about prisons and people escaping from prison and whatever it is, you know, a lot of people have had a story, a life journey, and they've come out of prison and they've turned their life around, haven't they, Biggins?
They have. They
have indeed.
Yeah.
So let's have a look here, and we'll show you our life behind bars.
Yeah.
That's me, Biggins.
And you're nameless, Biggins.
I know.
And there's Joe Swash, and we were welcoming him into prison there at that stage because our prison was known as the Celebrity Slammer. That's what it was.
And we've no idea why we were doing it.
Yeah. And, any more pictures there? Anything else to see? Just we can talk you through that.
No, that's it.
Is that it? That's it. Anyway,
but we did it for the money, didn't we?
We did it for the money.
Yeah.
And it was Celebrity Slammer. And I think the chief. I don't know if you're head of. But are you a lag if you're a prisoner?
Yeah, a lag if you're a prisoner. Yes.
So it was David Williams.
Yeah, David.
So he ran the wing basically for that. But
we have no other memories.
It wasn't for us.
No, it wasn't for
us. Really.
Orange wasn't our colour.
But it never made a series.
No, they certainly didn't.
But it does show there is life after prison, because we've got Biggins in reviewing the papers this morning. The rehabilitation's worked well, and we've also got former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall for this. And let's start with you, Claire. And I want to start with what's being described as Mickey Mouse degrees. I mean, the Prime Minister already has kind of declared war on those, hasn't he? And now a group of Tory MPs are saying that if you don't reach certain grades, that you shouldn't get a loan from the government because it's not good value for money for the taxpayer, because the majority of these people don't go on to earn graduate wages.
That's right, and I just fundamentally disagree with this. And
here, I'm with you.
It's all very well to say that degrees are Mickey Mouse, and there are some which are never going to be useful, but those courses will go by the wayside. But I don't think that you can have the right to say somebody, your A-level results were not very good, you must not go to university.
Well, they're not saying you can't go, they're just not going to be paid for by the taxpayer.
But they're saying they shouldn't go at all. And that is what this group is saying. This is the New Conservatives. They have suggested that these people will get 14 years' worth of education paid for by the state, and anything above that is considered to be a luxury. Well, that isn't going to encourage people to go on and find a passion in something.
And education's more than just exams.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It is, and that's what I fundamentally find so depressing about this, is that they are looking at the earning potential of an individual rather than exploring a subject that somebody likes. They may find something else that they're very good at, and a lot of people don't know what they want to do at 18.
But what's to say that these people don't then decide to take apprenticeships and go down a totally different path? Is it so bad to say, actually, you didn't get these grades, perhaps you'd be better going down this route?
I think the word perhaps is fine.
Yes.
I think to be told, you know, it's like the 11 plus. I mean, if you look on where the 11 plus still operates, that people's lives are changed by passing or failing at 11 years of age, what they're going to do and where they're going to do it. But it's so contentious, all of these things. But
I find it interesting that when I was young, in the 60s, I went to drama school and everything was paid for.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays, is it really so bad that there is no money to pay for? Because I think...
Well, then, I mean, I think something like 50% now go to university, whereas back in the 60s it wasn't anything like that. So there was more money going around per capita.
That was
head.
it. That was it.
Whereas, you know, so many more people want to go. Of course, the burden then increases on the taxpayer significantly.
But surely we should be looking at the way we fund university education, and the loan system where people are paying it back long into their 50s and 60s is not right.
No,
and
of course it's not right.
We need to address that before you start telling people they cannot go to university.
I remember primary school particularly as a magnificent learning adventure. It was marvellous to learn about, you know, Robinson Crusoe, Captain Cook,
dinosaurs,
nature, leaves, bark rubbing, you know, goodness
Roald
me,
Dahl,
so many things.
whatever it is.
And I'll always look back and say that was an amazingly fantastic time of learning, and I probably didn't even realise I was learning.
No, but it was great. I totally agree with you. I loved school in those days. It was just fantastic.
Well, I was aware of it that when you became 11, that you had to do an exam, and then it became really scary.
Yeah.
That if you passed or failed, and your life was determined as a result of whether you did pass or
Did you go
fail.
to university?
I didn't go to university, no, but I do have 2 doctorates.
Excuse me.
Christopher, let's talk about Alistair Stewart.
I know, this is so sad.
The Express.
I mean, I know Alistair really well, and the reason I know him, in the 80s, I did a TV series for TVS called On Safari for Children, and Sally, his wife, worked on it. So that's how I first met him then, and we've been friends ever since. And when I came to work here, like I'm doing now, it was lovely to see him again. And he was great, marvellous journalist, really good fun, and a twinkle in his eye. And then to hear this is devastating.
This awful disease.
It is an awful disease. And there's now going back to the 60s, did this exist then, do you think?
Yes, it was called hardening of the arteries. It was.
Was it?
It was, yeah. I remember
Serious?
my grandmother and whatever, and people would say, oh, what's wrong with her? And they would say, oh, she's got hardening of the arteries. That's the way they termed it. No one used the word dementia or anything like that.
What I would say, don't read it in the Express. Go on to our GB News website, watch the interview again with Camilla Tominey. You can watch it again really easily, 2 clicks, and it was a really powerful interview, tearful, emotive, and he's just got such a wonderful voice, a bit like you, Biggins.
Yes,
he really
great
projects.
voice.
He's got a great presence about him. He's given up smoking. He's doing everything he can. He's doing daily crosswords and all the rest of it to try and keep his brain ticking over. But there's not an awful lot you can do.
There's not, but the one thing that came out of that interview yesterday with Camilla was Alistair saying this is not the end of his life. That, yes, it's going to be different, but he's not hanging up his interviewing specs. He's going to carry on, and he's doing everything. He's, as you say, he's stopped smoking, he's doing longer walks with the dogs, he's doing puzzles to keep his brain occupied, and he's in touch with his medical professionals. And I think that that's the way you should look at this. When we all think of dementia or Alzheimer's, you look at it as a bit of a death sentence and somebody sitting in the corner not doing anything. Well, Alistair has proven that you can still get up, you can still do your job and be as smart as he is with suffering. And I think the kind of awareness that he is going to bring will be invaluable to
Well, good luck to him and his family. And he's got animals in his life, you know, horses in particular, which is good. Do we have this cat video? Or are we just talking about it? Everybody goes quiet.
Hysterical,
Right. So what we're going to see now is a prolific cat burglar caught red-handed. Let's have a look. So they're through the cat flap. And the reason, Isabel, I'm doing this because you plan to get a cat this week.
We have a kitten arriving on Friday, so I'm very excited. But did you see that, again, for our radio listeners, a cat's come in through the bob hole with something in its mouth. I'm not sure what it's stolen there.
A knife.
It's a knife. It's a knife?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, my. A murder weapon, probably.
I know. He's been out on the tiles that night. But, you know, what is so fascinating, he also stole a sieve. Quite a big sieve.
So
how did you get that through?
Yes, sieve. Maybe it's the magnetic collar.
Oh, do you think? That's a good point. But it's hysterical, though. I mean, the cat.
Great fun.
And apparently there are lots of cats who do a lot of stealing.
OK.
Yeah.
And what will they be doing in the hot weather today? Let's go to Rachel Ayres and find out.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. London. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies there across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, with the time fast approaching 8 o'clock, we have lots more coming up for you. 22 years on from the attack that changed the...
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 8 o'clock on the dot, Monday 11th of September. Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel. Webster, you're very welcome.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
22 years on from the attack that changed the world, as we look back on September the 11th, GB News learns that the terror threat in the UK is still as real as ever.
An inmate is stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after the terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped.
As the Prime Minister returns from the G20 summit in India, more details about the Westminster staff alleged to be spying for China.
And we'll be bringing you the latest weather updates with Rachel Ayres.
After a very warm to hot weekend, what can we expect from the weather as we go into the new week? Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
And in the world of tennis, there's a man who's hot.
Talking about me.
Novak Djokovic, how many titles?
24 Grand Slam titles, 4th US Open. In the Rugby World Cup, by the way, Wales got past Fiji just about. Scotland got beaten by South Africa, although it's a pool of death that they're in at the moment. And Luis Rubiales finally has woken up and smelled the coffee and decided that maybe it's time to step down.
OK, Paul, with you very shortly on that. And always, you can join in any of our discussions. Email us, which is what you've been doing today. The number there on your screen, or the address there on your screen. Big reaction on dogs. Paddy says there's no need to ban any dogs, just make it illegal for all dogs to be out and about without a muzzle. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. No, in fact, I don't agree with that. But
also lots of views on our top story. Sharon's been in touch, remembering where she was 22 years ago today when the Twin Towers were struck. I was living in Tampa, Florida, the day the towers fell. It was the scariest day of my life. I thought we were going to war, watching the news for days, and seeing the emergency services going into the towers was horrific.
Yeah. So your memories of those days very much welcome. So September the 11th it is today, 22 years since the world changed forever. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the space of 90 minutes.
Senior security experts have told GB News that large terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS could re-emerge as significant threats to the UK. And authorities are currently tracking around 800 live terror investigations.
We've got a special report now from our Home and Security editor, Mark White.
It was a brutal and shocking attack, heralding a new era of international terrorism, where groups like Al-Qaeda and then ISIS chose often soft targets in western cities, crowded places to cause maximum carnage. But in the 22 years since 9/11, those big organised terror groups have been severely degraded by concerted action from coalition armed forces and security services. Intelligence analysts over there at MI5 are constantly scanning the horizon for new threats. They are out there. Al-Qaeda, ISIS and associated groups are greatly diminished these days, but they could easily re-emerge. The terror groups are now scattered around multiple countries in the Middle East, Africa and Asia, and continue to launch more localised attacks. But extremism experts warn they could become a potent threat to the West again, as governments focus more on state threats from Russia, China and Iran.
I think the big fear has to be that if that pressure is lifted off, things might regress. And if we look at the underlying problems that sort of led to the emergence of a group like Al-Qaeda, that led to the emergence of a group like ISIS, that led to the rise of the sort of extreme right wing as a terrorist problem, around the world, really, none of those problems have really been resolved, and a lot of them are still bubbling below the surface.
For now, the predominant threat is from lone individuals radicalised by the propaganda arms of both Islamist and right-wing extremist groups. But with increasing ungoverned spaces in a number of countries, there is real concern that those more organised groups could once again flourish.
That's what they're really concerned about. Areas of Afghanistan, say, that don't have much rule of law over them, pockets of Syria, bits of North Africa where they might reinstate themselves. And make no mistake, that jihadi philosophy, that jihadi theories, the aim to create a jihadi state is still there amongst certain individuals.
UK authorities have told GB News they are currently pursuing around 800 live terror investigations. The majority relate to lone individuals, but also to more organised plots and threats from state actors. More than 2 decades after 9/11, the threat is far more diverse than it's ever been. Mark White, GB News.
Joining us now in studio, 22 years on from all of that, Robert Courts. Robert's a member of the Defence Select Committee in Parliament. Robert, we're asking everybody, I mean, do you remember the day? Do you remember what your reaction was? And I remember being very fearful. I actually thought, I was in London and I thought, this is the end of the world.
Yes, I mean, I think with all of us, it'll be a day that'll live in memory and nightmares forever. And I went over to the museum recently because I happened to be there for work. And when you've been through that experience as well, it brings it all coming back. I mean, I'll never forget, where I was, which I was just at home at the time. I was just waiting to go off to work. And I think as we look back at it now, the real realisation that we have is that that was a horrifying event that brought to an end a period of relative security and relative stability. Since when the world has got ever more dangerous. We've had those asymmetric threats. We now, of course, have the rise of much more traditional threats, as we've seen through Ukraine as well.
So, you're not filling me with a lot of hope here. You see it as a more dangerous world today, right? But have we increased our resistance, our intelligence gathering, our defences against this? Or are we as vulnerable as ever?
So you put your finger on what is the key point, which is about intelligence. And certainly 9/11 was a massive intelligence failure in terms of understanding what these people were coming into the United States to do. And that's clearly something that the Americans have looked at and have pored over. Now, our intelligence agencies are world-leading. They really are. That's not just bluster. They are exceptionally good. And you can see that in the run-up to Ukraine, for example, and what we knew and what we were learning from that point on. The critical importance to understand is that those things that often don't catch the headlines, but things that you don't see, things like the intelligence gathering, things like the logistics capability of our armed forces, those often aren't talked about, but are absolutely critical to all of those things that we have. I wouldn't want to not fill you with hope, but I do think everyone should realise that we are probably in a period of unparalleled danger and concern as the international community, because we don't just have these asymmetric threats of terror, we also have the rise of peer-on-peer challenge and potentially conflict in a way that we haven't seen throughout most of our lives.
When you say peer-on-peer, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm referring to Ukraine, of course, and the fact that we have a very bellicose Russia. We have, for the first time in our lives, mechanised large-scale warfare on the European continent. So you have peer conflict and peer challenge in a way that we just haven't seen. We've grown used to this.
Since the Second World War, really?
Not since the Second World War.
And meanwhile, we also now are seeing these threats appearing in our own country, in our own community, and I'm talking about these spies that were arrested, the researcher in Parliament, very close to presumably positions that, must make you question who's in your team, because we're talking about Tom Tugendhat, who is, of course, the security minister, and Alicia Kearns, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. You're in the Defence Select Committee. You must be wondering, who's around you?
Well, there's always a concern, of course, whenever you hear a story like this. You have to be aware that at any time espionage is going on. That's a point of public life. Whatever position you occupy, people will always be trying to find out secrets and to understand things. It is clearly very shocking to see one that is at the heart of British public life and right at the heart of our democracy. But we just need to be aware of these things and that they're there. One of the things that 9/11 did was, because of the massive focus on organised terror, on groups like Al-Qaeda, it's become much harder for them to operate because of the intelligence increases that I referred to already. So you've seen a lot of self-starters, and that means you have individuals who...
lone wolves, as the media like to call them, self-radicalised.
That's right, self-radicalised who tend to be inspired by groups rather than given direct instructions by groups. So that's a clear rise and a clear challenge, and that sort of eternal vigilance is always something that you have to remember. And as far as intelligence is concerned and gathering, clearly, are those who are our adversaries, our potential adversaries at the very least, will always be trying to gather information, and we have to remain alert to that.
Robert, what do you're... Obviously, your party's in power, the Conservative Party. What about defence spending? I mean, we're talking about here about, you say that our intelligence gathering capability is higher and better. But we hear a lot about defence budget isn't what it should be, and where else do we need to be investing or spending? I mean, for instance, we haven't talked about Irish Republican violence. Has that gone away? Is that still a threat? Where else? Who else is threatening us?
It's exactly the point, is that none of this has gone away. That's why I say we're at a period of perhaps unparalleled challenge, because you have all of those asymmetric threats that haven't gone and haven't been resolved. And we now have the return of something that we probably slightly complacently as a society hoped had gone away, of this much more conventional threat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I sit on the Defence Select Committee. My job is to scrutinise the government, and I am absolutely clear, as most parts of everyone on the committee would be, that we are just going to have to spend more on defence than we are. We are going to have to look at towards 3% of GDP. I don't want that to be an arbitrary figure itself. It's not just about money, it's about the threat. Now, just as a quick example, we released a report on aviation procurement just this weekend gone, and in every area of Royal Air Force capability, we are seeing a downgrade as kit is becoming more expensive, which means that the platforms, and more importantly the people, are being asked always to do more with less.
A big job then for our brand new Defence Secretary. We had him on the show last week. Lots of questions about him. I mean, do you think he's the right man for the job? And furthermore, we pushed him about his use of TikTok, and obviously it all relates to this Chinese espionage story today. Lots of concerns about that app. I know the Ministry of Defence use it themselves. He's adamant that he won't stop using it. Do you support the Defence Secretary in that?
So I know the Defence Secretary very well. I mean, he was the Transport Secretary when I was Aviation and Maritime, so he was my Secretary of State. So I've worked very, very closely with him. He's an extremely capable, very diligent, very hard-working guy. I think the issue is not so much about use of a platform. All use of IT carries with it a potential hazard. The idea, the point that's key is about what checks you have around it. So you wouldn't want it on a device that has access to top security. But if it were on a dedicated device, for example, there's little threat there, provided the rest of the phone doesn't have access to information that you would be concerned about. So per se, I don't see it's a concern, but you wouldn't want it on a secure device.
Yeah. And he said it was a work phone. It was nothing to do with him, sort of thing. But I want to say to you, Rob, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Channel 4 are running an excellent documentary called Top Guns Inside the RAF. I don't know if you've tuned into it yet.
I've seen a bit of it, yeah.
But getting very, very good. A good recruiting drive, I would have thought, for the RAF. Very good stuff.
Absolutely.
Good luck with your work, Robert. Thanks for giving us an insight into what's going on. That's Robert Courts. He is the MP for Whitney, member of the Defence Select Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, staying with politics now. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, says he confronted his Chinese counterpart at the G20 summit in New Delhi over alleged spying in Westminster. It came after 2 arrests, as we were just discussing, were made under the Official Secrets Act, including of a parliamentary researcher with links to several senior Conservative MPs.
Well, political commentator for Young Voices UK is Alex Petropoulos, and he joins us now to talk about this. Alex, a very, very good morning to you. Spies. How strong do you think the threat is?
Following up from the guest we just had on, the threat is always there, but the threat's increasing. I think that what's interesting about this event is it really puts into focus China. And for the longest time, all of our foreign affairs and all of our concerns have all been laser focused on Russia and laser focused on the war in Ukraine. And maybe we've sort of gotten a bit lazy and said, well, we'll forget about China for a little bit. But we have to remember that China is the rising power in the region, and that Russia is on the way out, beyond the fact that it is obviously very important to focus on. So to the extent that we're now paying a lot of attention to it, and we're now having to ask and answer a lot of questions about what is our stance towards China, we may be in a better place than we were a week ago.
And what do you think about our stance towards China? We've seen this softening under Prime Minister Sunak, calling them a challenge rather than a threat. That's outraged some Conservative MPs, many of whom are sanctioned themselves, like Ian Duncan-Smith, who think that we need to treat them, more suspiciously, frankly?
I think that it really comes down to the timeline, because we found out that this person was arrested under espionage charges back in March. And the real question is, how long has Rishi Sunak known about that? And how long has he essentially known that there was this high level of attack on our parliamentary system by China? And has that informed how he's changed our stance towards China? Because we saw just 2 weeks ago, James Cleverly, the foreign secretary, became the highest ranking member of the British cabinet to visit China on a state visit since before the pandemic. So there's clearly not a softening up of stances. And when you compare that with these revelations, there are lots of questions to be asked about whether this system of softening towards China is working and whether we're getting results out of it.
If you were to learn that the Prime Minister did know back in March about this arrest, and one would assume presumably that he would, given his position. You know, do you think he was wrong then to send James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, there? I mean, he would argue, I think, the Prime Minister would argue that they are economic partners and there's lots of growth potential through working with them. And, you know, it's a balance, isn't it? It's a balancing act.
You know, there's definitely a balance between wanting to not economically shoot ourselves in the foot by cutting off China altogether. But at the end of the day, the line that comes out of China all the time is, don't mess with our internal affairs and we won't mess with yours. That's always the line they pull out whenever anyone in the West tries to criticize something happening in their own turf. But when you compare this with what's happened now...
That means because you are interfering with our internal affairs or having an opinion on that, they're basically saying, well, we're gonna stick our nose in everywhere in your society.
Yeah, it works both ways. And importantly, we can have economic relations while still being able to take that diplomatic channel and essentially say, look, you said this, you've now done this, this is the line in the sand. If you don't change the way you're acting, there will be repercussions. And it's hard to criticize how diplomacy is going because it all happens behind closed doors. But I think one thing to be said is that, you know, we left the EU, and for better or for worse, that means that our foreign policy is now much more on us than it is on our allies. And so when that is the case, inaction is a lot more anaction. And so if we just sit back and say we're not going to do anything about it, that is in and of itself an active decision, and one that we should realise should be critiqued.
A political commentator for Young Voices UK. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. The time, 17 minutes past 8 o'clock. A prisoner has been stabbed at Wandsworth. Officers, as well as the London Ambulance Service, were called to the scene, and a 24-year-old was taken to hospital for a stab wound.
The Metropolitan Police have confirmed his condition is not life-threatening, but all of this, of course, comes as Daniel Khalif escaped from Wandsworth Prison. It all happened within the same week.
Former prisoner and founder of User Voice, Mark Johnson, joins us now to talk about this. We're trying to get inside, are the prisons fit for purpose? And do you think they are?
Definitely not. I mean, you know, we have an inspectorate body, different inspectorate bodies actually in this country. That's Charlie Taylor for prisons, Justin Russell's for probation, and over like their sort of whole tenure and ones before it have always wrote quite damning reports of the state of prison. So the last one was 3/4 of the whole prison estate is poor and inadequate. You know, Wandsworth was opened in 1851. It was built for 950 prisoners. It's 170% over capacity, so there's 1,600 prisoners in there. Half are unemployed. The rest are locked up for 22 hours a day. And even of the employed, about 30% aren't available for full duties. So when we're picking up, and I'm really glad that the media's picking up over individual incidents, there was 22,000 assaults in British prisons last year, 1,800 of which were prisoner to prisoner, and they go unrecorded. So if you imagine, if you've got 22 hours a day behind the door, you can imagine what's going on inside that door. that's not being recorded. So, and when the government's been recording, especially for the last 4 years, that prison assaults have dropped. We know that they haven't because they're just not being recorded properly.
Right. And then you have the incident of a stab.
I think I really, really welcome that how justice has come back on the table, really, around a public discussion. It really needs to.
And we should say you speak from experience because you are a former prisoner. Where did you serve time, Mark?
Sorry, I've lost the sound.
Just asking you where you spent time. Where did you serve your time as a prisoner?
We seem to have lost our communication there.
Isn't it amazing how rubbish communications are?
Can be.
Isn't it? It's like my son said to me yesterday, "Oh, Dad, your Wi-Fi is really awful in the living room, and you know, why can't it just work?" And all our lives are so hooked up on it, and then when it's there, everything's fantastic, and then when it disappears, our lives are all rubbish. How rubbish is your Wi-Fi? Let us know this morning. We are dependent on everything from burglar alarms through to computer systems.
And it all
in the
ties into this prison story. I mean, lots of people live close to prisons, and you know, are people worried today about how safe they are from escapees?
Well, let me tell you something. Do you see that Wandsworth prison there? My grammar school, St Malachy's College, backed on to the prison.
Did it?
Yeah, which looked exactly like Wandsworth.
What a lovely looking building.
When our ball went over the wall, and you could hear the prisoners cheer next door. So we were playing in the sports fields, whatever, and the ball went over the wall. You didn't go round and ask for it back, put it like that, you know? And I actually went into it. I was never in it before, and I went into it earlier in the year, where they do tours now, and it's all tourism as a Victorian sort of prison. But it really is very, very scary. I mean, you wouldn't want that as a life. You really wouldn't want.
Who would put a primary school next to a prison in their right mind? Who would put the most dangerous people next to kids?
Well,
maybe during the Troubles that was the safest place to be. I don't know.
Maybe it was just easy. Maybe a lot of us ended up there anyway. I don't know really what went, but that was it. But
listen, apparently it's bunk off. What's it? Bunk off Britain Day today. Last day of this heat wave. Lots of people decided to call in sick. If you're one of them, we want to hear from you. We won't out you, we promise. But Rachel Ayres is here to tell us just how hot it's going to be.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures are a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies though across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's 8:24. Lots more still to come on our programme this morning, including
Paul Coit. Coity's here with the latest from sport, and Djokovic falls to his knees, having won his millionth Grand Slam title.
It's getting a bit boring now. I'm allowed to say that. We need some other talent in there.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel that already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Most of the sports news is discussed during the commercial break while you're away, but we'll let you earwig on us here. Paul Coyte.
You mean I have to do it again now with you?
You have to do it again. Do you know, one of the things you were saying earlier on at the US Open at Flushing Meadow, and we've got some dress room...
Arena Sabalenka. Yeah,
right,
Arena Sabalenka. This is where we left off, wasn't it? Arena Sabalenka, who lost the final to Coco Gauff. Now... There's, should we say, dressing room fit of peak. Now, we do have it this time. Now, this is what happened in the change room. Look, there she goes. After she's lost, she puts the plate there for the runners-up. And there, she seems quite calm. She goes into her bag, pulls out her racket. What's she going to do with that? Little practice? Oh, I gotta smash it on the floor.
Maybe there was a mouse on the floor or an insect or something.
Oh, she's disappointed. Look,
Smashes it on the floor.
She's a champion in her own right.
What she does with the racket.
She doesn't like losing. Look. But listen, Coco Gauff had a home crowd. You know, as an American winning the US Open, it always has an unfair advantage.
Goes straight into the bin as well. And it goes straight into the bin. And what was interesting is that...
So the poor racket gets the blame.
Yeah, always the way. It's
Sponsors, I
always
love
the
that.
poor racket. Judy Murray, though, has now spoken up. She's tweeted. She said that this footage should never have been made public.
Yes.
A private moment in an empty training room after the disappointment of losing a Grand Slam final. Now, maybe I'm a little cynical about the whole situation, but Izzy, you watched Breakpoint, didn't you?
Well, Breakpoint have the access, but that's obviously all pre-agreed in the kind of way we're used to seeing with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex with their Netflix stuff, so that they have these cameras set up. And it's brilliant. You have this big sign, apparently, as they walk out into the US Open saying pressure is a privilege, and you see the players like, touching it or...
We should remember
We should have that. It is a privilege. But, you know, you have all this behind-the-scenes footage, which makes it magical. But I think I agree with Judy Murray.
Well,
these cameras, where does it end?
Let me tell you, because what's actually happened is that, firstly, she has signed up for the new series of Breakpoint, which is behind the scenes. So there's one thing. Now, what we don't see, because there's more footage of that, which is slightly wider, and then just to the right-hand side, there's a guy with a big microphone.
No.
There's another...
Do you think it's acted out for the camera?
Yes, I do. The first time I saw it, and I just thought, oh, poor thing, and people are going, well, it's great that she's managed to keep it all in, and then she's waited until she's got it. She knew exactly what she was doing, so it wasn't a matter of poor thing and how... I mean, let's face it. In this day and age, or any time, are they going to allow a camera...
Let's run it again, just as we're talking about all this. Put it out.
Exactly. You can't actually sit, but they are, I promise you, to the right-hand side.
But it just shows you can never really believe what you see or the context of things.
Unless it's with the three of us.
Yes,
but apart, you can never trust it. So
I think we're sending that.
It seemed like a private moment. They're off to the right-hand side. She knows the cameras are there. So there's one filming there, and there are...
So that's
there's
not
more...
like a CCTV camera or something?
Look at it. It's perfect quality.
No, that is a CCTV camera.
But there is also a crew, at the same time, because she knew.
So you will see that in the next series.
Oh, well, there you go.
Of Breakpoint.
But you see, I don't want to see... This literally goes in a bin, does it?
Yeah, you know what, though? If you were emptying the bins and that was your job,
it's worth a pretty penny.
You'd be all over eBay, wouldn't you? Actually get, you know, and it'd be like, well, screw the job. I'm going to put this. I'll make more money from probably selling this racket. Should mention. I got to mention the Rugby World Cup because
look, it was great. Ireland narrowly got through against, was it Romania?
They did narrowly, 82-8. So yeah, I mean,
scraped a win.
Well, all I'm going to say, Eamonn, is Romania scored 8 points against Ireland. What's going on there?
Why is anybody else taking part? I mean, Ireland are obviously going to win this tournament.
Well, the Welsh were looking good yesterday.
Well, it's all very well with you with the Welsh and you with the Irish, but after a week ago, everybody's thinking England aren't going to do anything. Now, England are going to win the World Cup. It's like a fantastic result against Argentina.
Although too much kicking from England. I know, but it was
What do you mean? Kicking at each other or kicking the ball?
As in, there weren't any tries scored. It was entirely a win through kicking.
But points on the board.
But my grandfather, God love him, you know, he would always ring us after every England game to give his analysis, and he hated the too much kicking coming into the game, and it's crept in.
Points are points, I think. Gosh, if you can get them. I mean, you know...
It's not good rugby, though.
Listen,
I don't agree.
I agree. I'm with you. I want to win the game.
Gaelic football's played like that. American rules football's played like that.
I want to win the game, and if it manages that way, then that's the way it's going. It's the group of death. Although Scotland were the only home nation that actually lost, but it was against the champion South Africa.
Yeah.
So it's.
See, I'd be saying, if I that kicking business, I'd be saying, right, are you going to hurt me as I run down this wing and ram me off the pitch?
Like a true footballer.
Yeah. Or will I just drop kick instead? That's what I say. Give me plenty of room and I'll drop kick.
Keep it nice and easy. Mo Farah. Now, Mo...
Does he play rugby?
No, I don't. You know what?
He'd be fast on the wing.
I think he'd be knocked down pretty quickly. He'd probably blow it and then he would probably go over. But he would be fast on the wing, you're right. But Mo Farah has finally called time. His last race is run. It's not even a proper mobot he's doing there, is it? But it was in the Great North Run yesterday, came fourth to age 40, 4 Olympic gold medals, Rio 2016, London 2012, of course.
What's he got that big sleeve on for? I thought that was...
You know what? Tennis players do that. I can't...
These are like 2 sleeves he's got, like a green one and then...
Is it keeping the blood? Is it, you know, something like a...
There's a lot of track athletes that wear them. It's just those... It's just the sleeve. I can't really understand why, if you're going to wear the sleeve, wear a full shirt.
I wondered if it was blood pumping or something. I don't know.
But anyway, he's retired.
Someone at home will know.
I don't know whether it means he's retired forever. He's still going to run, but from competition. One more I've got for you. Germany. England, Scotland is tomorrow. And one of our great foes, of course, Germany sacked their manager, Hansi Flick, 5-1, 4-1. I mean, they lost against Japan.
Is that his real name, or did you just
Hansi
make
Flick?
that up?
No, it's not Hair Flick.
All right.
Well, I suppose it is Hair Flick.
Yeah,
exactly, it is
but
Hair Flick.
Hansi Flick is now gone.
Hansi Flick.
Hansi Flick is gone. And also, one of their great managers, one of the the greatest German player of all time would be Franz Beckenbauer's birthday today.
Oh.
So I'm going to ask you how, there he is, holding the World Cup in 74. There he is with the late great Bobby Moore.
I'll say he's 73.
73? Right, come on, Izzy, this is your one. Now, it's 73. Did you have any Beckenbauer Super boots? I always wanted a pair of those. Did you have any of the Adidas Beckenbauer Supers?
What do they call them? The General?
69.
Der Kaiser. Das Kaiser.
Oh, right.
Get a little bit higher.
82.
A little slightly lower.
76.
We could go on for a while. I feel like Bruce Forsyth. 78 is the answer.
78 years
De
young.
Kaiser.
Happy
De Kaiser,
De
that's
Kaiser is 78 today, the greatest German player of all time. So maybe manager for Italian 90, maybe it's time for De Kaiser to go back and look after things at Germany.
I wonder would that make Bobby Moore, if he had have lived, to see a picture of their similar sort of age.
Yeah, be up there as well. I mean, died far, far too young. Over 30 years ago now. But it was cancer, wasn't it? Yeah, testicular cancer. But just one of the greats, who also never got the recognition he deserved because had he lived, would have been Sir Bobby Moore, would be seen as one of the ultimate greats. But it was at a time when English football really didn't pay enough attention to the legends. Whereas now you look at Sir Geoff Hurst, Sir Bobby Charlton, and whereas Bobby Moore never lived to see all that, which is a very sad thing, although the greatest player.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
We're going through the papers in just a moment, and we will be talking about the demise of our British high streets. Are they turning into looting grounds for shoplifters? Do we need a royal commission review into them to try and revive our town centres? Let us know your thoughts. That's up next. You are watching GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Claire Purcell and Christopher Biggins, they've got the newspapers this morning and various other things. We're not supposed to say newspapers, we're supposed to...
Headline making.
Headline making. Everything is just generally in the news and things that you want to watch on television or not or whatever. Anyway, minis. I think the Mini is a design icon.
I love the Mini.
I think it's absolutely... And do you know what, Isabel? When you think of an original Mini in the 50s, 60s, whatever, so tiny.
Yeah.
So tiny. And frail, fragile, without bumpers and whatever. And these new generation ones, Claire, you want to talk about now, because BMW is to manufacture this next generation of electric Minis, and there was a Mini factory in Oxford, but this is guaranteeing the future of a lot of workers there.
It certainly is, and my first car was a Mini. And it was a Y-Reg when it was at the other end of the number plate. So it was a very old, tiny Mini, brilliant car. Absolutely adored it.
Did it leak? Did it flood?
Yes, it did. If you went through a puddle that was a bit too deep, it stopped.
Yes.
You learned very quickly to drive with some WD-40 and get the spark plugs dry. And it had a manual choke.
Yes, indeed.
So on cold mornings.
And you could flood the engine very easily.
Absolutely. And I did, but I learned an awful lot about driving.
Yeah.
And you could get it to 50. But it was a bit shaky.
OK.
So
I had a minivan.
Oh,
is that like a countryman?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I was coming back from Derby, where I was doing rep to Salisbury, and I travelled through the night, and I was very tired, and I overturned it. And I was upside down.
Can I ask you how you overturned it?
What?
How did you overturn it?
I was just going round and round about too fast.
My.
And I went over, and I remember waking up, or not waking up, I remember feeling a burning sensation. And what happened was the battery of the Mini was behind the driver's seat. And it all was dripping out on me.
The acid came out.
So,
have you ever woken up during the middle of the night and had acid reflux?
Oh, yeah, that's horrible.
You might as well drink the battery acid. As well. It's the most awful thing.
I mean, is this a good thing? I mean, we're seeing, obviously, a lot of government investment into this. We saw last week a huge announcement in Ellesmere Port. We're kind of getting the impression that post-Brexit trading arrangements aren't inhibiting our potential and ability to manufacture cars here in the UK. A good thing, worth the money from the taxpayer?
Do you know what I think it is? I'm really pleased that the government has invested, and as we were talking about previously, it's not a huge amount of money when you're talking about government spending, but it gives BMW the understanding that the government is behind them, the jobs that it will create, and manufacturing in the United Kingdom needs to be brought back up to where it was. So I'm really pleased that we've gone ahead. What I don't want to see is we lag behind on infrastructure, because it's all very well to have electric cars out there, but if you have nowhere to charge them, then that's pretty useless. But I do think this is good, and we're seeing a lot of investment, especially in Jaguar Land Rover as well, in Cornwall with a battery plant. So that is more up and coming, and it's going to create jobs and help grow the economy.
And there is history, there's a lineage of building Minis in Oxford as well. I mean, compared to when the Thatcher government set up the DeLorean plant in Northern Ireland. It wasn't the Thatcher government, actually, she closed it. Whoever it was before Thatcher. Who was it before Thatcher? It was...
Brown.
No, it was, what's his name? Callaghan.
Callaghan.
Yeah. And so basically we didn't have an infrastructure or a lineage of building cars anywhere in Northern Ireland, though we we eventually did it very well, but there were a lot of teething problems where this workforce knows what they're doing.
They do, and it's a very proud tradition that they have at that plant, and it's going to be increased. And also down the road in Swindon, you're going to see some boost in battery technology and stuff coming along there. And I think it is really
I want to get a battery car, and the one I do want to get is the DeLorean. I want to get somebody. I want to get somebody to say, produce a DeLorean now with a battery, right? And it'll literally will be Back to the Future.
Back to the Future with Eamonn Holmes. Oh,
and it'll probably take you 100 feet before you charge.
Yeah, no, the trouble is I couldn't get in and out of it now. I mean, the gull wing doors, and up they go. Yeah. But I don't know if I could get down.
The door might help you out. Lift you up as you go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Prince Harry, shall we? He was in a penalty shootout, would you believe? Who did he lose to, Biggins?
A German.
Oh, no.
A 63-year-old German.
Yeah, but I tell you what I'm thrilled about is I'm a great fan of Harry's. And I think it's wonderful that he's gone there. I mean, it's so sad that he had a day here and he didn't see his brother or his father, and especially his father, which was a terrible shame, I think. We must start getting back together again, surely. I mean, and we all have rows with our families and everything happens. But, you know, I think he's doing... He's been received so wonderfully once again over there because the Invictus Games are his, and he is brilliant at it. He's just wonderful.
Well, he knows what he's talking about. He's very credible with it. He does it very well, and she's not there.
And she's not there,
yes. All of which helps.
Anyway, I think he's doing a wonderful job, and I'm a great fan of his.
Time to heal the wounds, you think?
Yes, I think so.
Claire, I'm a big coffee fan. I don't know about you, but concerned, though, what coffee might say about me.
You see.
What are they saying in the Times, too, about this?
This is the usual sort of what it signifies about your social standing in life, and they've gone through a sort of light-hearted list. And apparently, if you are a double espresso drinker, you are well-read and well-travelled. White Americano, a straight talker, and if you like a mocha, sort of a chocolate-type coffee, then you're sexier than the average.
Oh, my.
I mean, it doesn't say what
Do you like a mocha?
I flick between a mocha very occasionally when I'm hungry and I feel like I need some sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I go and have a flat white, so I think I am quite straight talking.
I've heard that about you.
Have you?
Yes. A flat white.
Let's move on.
I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life.
Well, I feel sorry for you.
Never dined one.
I love a coffee.
No?
You're missing out. You really, really are.
What about a coffee cake? Ever had coffee cake? I love a coffee cake.
I love coffee cake. Great. But this whole... What's this rubbish they print about people drinking coffee? It was ridiculous.
But it goes through everything from painted nails, dog breeds, footwear, cars, and, of course, it's just somebody's opinion
of
where you stand in society. And there's a classic bit about trousers, and, of course, it has to mention sort of the variation on red trouser man, owner of dogs, Tory voter. We always have to have these little comparisons.
Clichés.
Did you say nipples, by the way?
No.
You did little. I think she said little.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe it was little nipples, but...
It can't bring you anywhere, Biggins. Nipples!
Do you have little nipples or very big nipples?
They're all right, I think. How are yours?
I'm fine, thank you, darling.
Do you remember this pub in the Midlands, that this crooked pub that was mysteriously set on fire and then knocked down and whatever it is? Well, I've got a report on this now because that was a month ago, and it's been over a month since this arson attack occurred on what was called the Crooked House pub. OK, then it was demolished. And local people have been campaigning and protesting that they want the pub rebuilt. Crooked, built brick by brick.
And one man's taken the protection of the site into his own hands and has started what's now called Camp Wonky, and our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, went to find out more.
When a much-loved Black Country pub went up in flames and was later unlawfully demolished, few could have predicted the size and strength of the campaign to rebuild it. A month on from the arson attack on the Crooked House pub, some campaigners are taking the protection of the site into their own hands. Rob Brown visited the pub when he was a child and has created Camp Wonky to keep an eye on the site at all times. He says he's doing it to keep every chance of rebuilding the Crooked House alive.
We want our pub built back for everyone to enjoy for years and kids to learn the history. I mean, the amount of wars this has gone through and prohibition times, all that. All the kids need to learn this proper black country history. To me, it's something I want to do. I don't care what anybody else thinks. My opinion is I'll camp here and make a point, make a stand.
The story of the Crooked House has had international reach, and the attention doesn't show any sign of slowing down. People here are firm in their support for getting the Crooked House rebuilt, and 25,000 of its bricks are now stacked and secured in the containers behind me. But elsewhere, attention is turning to legislation to help prevent things like this from happening again. Conservative MP for Dudley North, Marco Longy, is leading the voice for change in Parliament.
I've had people writing to me and say, Marco, oh, but it's just not about pubs, there's about all sorts of heritage building, and I'm going, I agree. But the wider I make this umbrella, the bigger I make this tent, as laudable a cause as it is, the more possibilities for the law to become just too big to deal with in one go. Let's get some successes. Let's make the Crooked House clause or the Crooked House law the first stepping stone and then expand upon that. So it's going to be about heritage pubs, and I'm going to be just looking at one or two very specific angles and then build on that in the future.
The police investigation to find those responsible for setting the Crooked House alight is still ongoing. As the weeks go by, support for rebuilding this piece of black country heritage gets stronger and stronger. Jack Carson, GB News, Himley.
Well, good luck to the Crooked Pub. I'm not sure how it ever ended up crooked in the first place, but it's now collapsed and collapsed with the help of a bulldozer or two. And will they get their way with this? But I was wondering, Biggins, how anybody has time to sit in a pub, crooked or not. The way we use pubs now is differently. I think it's associated with food now, pubs.
Yeah, I think, we were just talking about that, Isabel and I, but I never go to a pub. I mean, the only pubs I go to is if I go to the country and stay with some friends, but I go to the pub for lunch. You're right, it's going to eat,
food. Are you a pub fan, Claire?
Again, it's a food thing, and I've got a couple of lovely local pubs that do food, but it's not something that is a regular occurrence. It's a bit of a treat to go and eat out at the moment. And it is nice if they have a garden, especially with the weather's been good.
Cheaper, too, to eat in a pub.
But there are people who, 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon or whatever, will be there. They'll be sitting there and they'll pass their time. And it's a great social thing for, that's how you meet people and people talk to people and whatever.
It's good for, Christmas get-together or a birthday or something, or mum's get-together, mum's night out has been known. But you're right, I wouldn't go regularly of an evening, which is a shame, really, because if we don't use them, we lose them.
Let's talk about middle-aged Love Island. Front page of it. What's the headline, Isabel? What are they screaming?
Why we put our mums on middle-aged Love Island? Why do they put their mums on middle-aged Love Island? I mean, I don't...
Hoping you'll tell us.
Well, I tell you a quite interesting story. When I was 18 and a half years old, I went to drama school, and I was an only child. And before I left to go to drama school in Bristol, my mother turned round to me and said, "Oh, by the way," she said, "Christopher," she said, "I'm pregnant." And I went, "What?" I was appalled that my mother was pregnant. The fact they were still doing it.
How old was your mum then?
42.
Oh, wow.
My mum was 48, right?
48 was she?
And I wouldn't tell anybody at school. I was 16 at the time.
Yeah.
And I was so embarrassed.
I was devastated. Devastated. And it was Robin Ellis's fault. Do you remember Robin Ellis?
Yes, Poldark, yeah.
Because he had a party at the repertory company, which I was a part of in Salisbury, and he invited them to a party, and they went home, got a bit squiffy, and did the deed.
Come on, 42 is young, Biggin.
Oh, I was so embarrassed.
Embarrassed?
Yes.
Do you know how Isabel was conceived?
Oh, stop it.
Embarrassed. Well, let me tell you the story.
No.
Her father told me this.
We actually edited that out of my father's wedding speech when he told everybody in detail all about it. Moving swiftly on.
Anyway,
why we put our mum on middle-aged Love Island.
I know, who would do such a thing? I mean, what do they think of next? They've got no bright ideas, these television people. Are you listening?
I think it's a good idea. Why do you just have to be young?
I agree with you. I mean,
beautiful?
ITV are the worst. I mean, if it's not Anton Deck, or it's not Simon Cowell, or it's not Bradley Walsh on The Chase,
I know.
They've got no other ideas.
No other ideas whatsoever.
Do we not think that perhaps behind all of this is really just the cynical 20-somethings looking for their own career?
Possibly.
Yes,
out there as
you're right.
Maybe you're right.
It could be a little bit cynical.
OK, and the weather's all right. Let's have a look.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies though across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
That time is fast approaching 9 o'clock. We have lots more for you, including our reflections on 20...
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Monday, the 11th of September. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what we've been covering on Breakfast so far this morning.
22 years on from the attack that changed the world. As we look back on September the 11th, GB News has learned that the terror threat in the UK is still concerning.
BMW plans to build its next generation electric Mini at its Oxford plant after securing £75 million of government funding.
An inmate stabbed at Wandsworth Prison just days after the terror suspect Daniel Khalif escaped.
And as the Prime Minister returns from the G20 summit in India, more details come out about the Westminster staff allegedly spying for China.
And we'll be bringing you the latest weather updates with Rachel Ayres.
After a very warm to hot weekend, what can we expect from the weather as we go into the new week? Join me later for a full forecast with all the details.
Now, it is our top story this morning, and we've been covering it throughout the last few hours. Senior security experts have told GB News that large organised terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS could re-emerge as significant threats to the UK. Well, we can speak now to the Shadow Minister for Security, Dan Jarvis. A very good morning to you. And I want to start by asking you about our top story this morning on this 22nd anniversary of September the 11th. And how concerned are you about the threat of these big terrorist organisations?
Well, good morning. I think this is a very concerning report. It is 9/11 today. It is an important reminder of the terrible events back in 2001. And I think your report is a timely reminder that whilst the focus recently, for understandable reasons, has been on activity from state actors here in this country, and there are some very serious questions to be answered about that, we should not lose sight of the fact that terrorist organisations like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, haven't gone away, and they are working to plan and prepare to do the kind of attacks potentially that they may have done previously. So that is something that we need to keep a very close eye on and work closely with our allies and partners around the world to make sure that they have neither the capacity or the capability to carry out terrorist activities.
I want to ask you about some breaking news we're hearing in the last few moments about the government rescue deal for Wilko. We understand it has failed and there are huge job loss fears as a result. Your reaction to that developing story, please?
Well, I'm obviously concerned and saddened to hear that. This is a big story which will impact on workers right around the country, including my own constituency in Barnsley. I think the government needs to do everything that it possibly can to try and support a deal so that those jobs can be saved. Wilko is a well-known and well-loved high street retailer. It employs a lot of people, and clearly there will be huge concern amongst their employees. So it is very concerning to hear that this deal hasn't gone forward, and I hope the government will look at what can be done to salvage any opportunities in order to make sure that those people don't lose their jobs.
A busy week ahead for your boss, Sir Keir Starmer, but he still managed to find time to do a pretty extensive interview with the Sunday Times yesterday, in which the line came out saying, only I can bring order to the border. Pretty audacious claim, isn't it, for someone who, well, he's made his career as a lefty lawyer, as is so often described, and, well, he's opposed to the Rwanda scheme. And, of course, Labour famous for its internationalist outlook on life. How can we trust Labour on trying to grapple the issue of the small boats?
Well, let me be clear, this is something that we take very seriously indeed. Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, myself and our whole team are working hard to look at what more can be done to defeat the vile network of smugglers that enable people to get on boats and cross the channel. You'll remember, of course, that this is one of the Prime Minister's 5 pledges that he made to stop the boats. He's not been successful in terms of doing that. So that's why Keir Starmer will be travelling to The Hague on Wednesday. He will be having conversations with Interpol to look at what we can do to smash that vile network of people traffickers. I think there is much more that the government should be doing, and we are looking constructively to work with partners such as Interpol to make sure that the networks of organised, serious smuggling, trafficking operations are crushed to prevent people from being trafficked in the way that they are at the moment.
Yeah, but do you think the voters will buy it?
I think that there is huge concern about the issue of illegal immigration. I think very few people that I've spoken to have any real faith or trust that the government have got a plan to address this significant challenge. Look, I think we all agree it's completely unacceptable that anybody should be seeking to cross the channel in a boat. The issue is what you do about it. The government have said that they're going to stop it. They haven't stopped it. We've said that we'll set up a new cell within the National Organised Crime Agency to look at what more can be done to disrupt, defeat, ultimately to smash these vile networks that are profiting as a result of human misery. Keir Starmer, rightly, will be in The Hague talking to Interpol about this week, and I think that demonstrates the credibility that he has on this issue.
OK, listen, the TUC Congress conference is getting underway today, and we understand that the boss of the TUC, of course, big backers of the Labour Party, is reporting the government the United Nations watchdog over their anti-strike legislation. Do you support that?
Well, the anti-strike legislation was deeply flawed. That's why we opposed it in government. And Angela Rayner will be speaking at the TUC forum. It's a really important gathering of trade unions from right around the country, and she will outline the detail of our plan, a working plan which the next Labour government would introduce. We've said that we'll repeal this legislation within the first 100 days of the next Labour government, and Angela Rayner will lay out the details of our proposals.
But, I mean, just explain to me which bit of going through Parliament is undemocratic.
Well, the point I was making is that we have never supported these proposals. We think that they were deeply flawed. They're not supported by a very significant number of employers around the country. I think the Transport Secretary, the Education Secretary conceded at one stage that these were not effective proposals that were being brought forward. The TUC provides a good forum to have a meaningful conversation with the trade unions about how we can work collaboratively together to invest in our workforce and make sure that we are best placed to achieve economic success. And Angela Rayner will talk through some of the detail of what a future Labour government would do to enable that.
Shadow Security Minister Dan Jarvis, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Daniel Khalif has been charged with escaping custody after 4 days on the run. The 21-year-old terrorist suspect had strapped himself underneath a food delivery van to escape from Wandsworth Prison last Wednesday. We've also received pictures in the last half hour of Khalif being transported to Westminster Magistrates ahead of his appearance before the judge today. Let's go to our Home and Security editor Mark White on this one. Well, what's ahead for him, Mark?
Well, it will be usually, as it is in these first magistrates' court appearances, probably a brief appearance to be remanded back into custody for his first Crown Court appearance, whenever that will be. But you're right, he arrived within the last 20 minutes or so here to Westminster Magistrates Court, armed police van with following security vehicles as well. Not a surprise, I think, given the high-profile nature of this individual and the crime he's been charged with, escaping from lawful custody. He was detained on Saturday morning just before 11 a.m. Plainclothes officers on a canal towpath in Northolt in West London knocked him from his bicycle and arrested him. That was at the end of several days of a nationwide manhunt, as this 21-year-old had escaped from Wandsworth Prison early on Wednesday morning. It was just before 8 a.m. on that Wednesday morning that the prison authorities noticed that Khalif was missing and raised the alarm. And then, of course, in the subsequent days, we saw very significant search activity. Dozens of police officers, helicopters scouring the massive 2,500-acre Richmond Park in southwest London. There were other sightings in Wandsworth, in Chiswick on Saturday morning as this whole incident came to a dramatic conclusion. Several members of the public reported seeing him changed clothing by that time, not wearing the chef's outfit that he was wearing because he'd worked in the kitchens at Wandsworth Prison, the white t-shirt and the red and white checked trousers, instead wearing dark clothing and a black baseball cap. But there were multiple sightings and apparently he made his way to Northolt, to that canal path where he was arrested by those plainclothes officers who spotted a man answering his description. So as I say, he is now in the court behind me, Westminster Magistrates Court, for that first appearance before being remanded back into custody. And I think one final note to mention here, he was due to stand trial on a number of terrorism and Official Secrets Act spying charges in November. I'm sure that his defence team will now be asking for that trial date to be knocked on a bit, given just how soon after his recapture that is. They will argue, I'm sure, that he is unlikely to get a fair trial with everybody still aware of this story so fresh in their minds.
Mark, I have to ask you about sort of bigger picture stuff and the situation at the prison from which he escaped. We obviously understand yesterday there was a stabbing incident. We also learnt from the government over the weekend that a number of inmates had to be moved as well. I mean, is it your reading of this that there is a crisis in our prison service?
Listen, there's been a crisis in the prison service for as long as I've been in Home Affairs journalism. The fact is, most people don't talk about it or don't really care. You know, prisoners are locked up, and as far as most of the public are concerned, they're out of sight. It only ever comes to a head when there is a major incident such as a prison escape, and then of course people are understandably concerned. But we will get now, because this is uppermost in everybody's minds, lots of reports, I can guarantee it, in the coming days of serious assaults, stabbings and other incidents in prison, just because it is fresh in the memories for everyone. But I can tell you that last year alone there were 2,225 serious assaults, including stabbings, in prisons in England and Wales. It is, sad to say, an everyday occurrence.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew Pearce is here with Britain's newsroom at 9:30. I'm just wondering, that whole prison thing, Mark was saying there's always been a crisis in prisons, and you know, I think the public don't mind their money being spent on prisons or prison guards or the police service or whatever it happens to be, anything that keeps them safe. But politicians think differently. That's why they don't build prisons, because it costs money, and they certainly are not manning them correctly.
There's not enough prisons, and we've got a record number of prisoners in prison, and that this guy who was on the run should have been in a maximum security prison, which is where he's now. He was in it initially. They took him out. Why? Madness. And there's been austerity, and I'm afraid it's affected the prison service. Morale in prisons is appalling. Yeah. You can't keep the staff who are experienced who you need there too.
Failing Grayling responsible for a lot of
that, I'm afraid. Yeah, he's got a lot to answer for. Big day today, of course, because I suspect later today in the Commons I would be amazed if an MP doesn't name the so-called spy, Chinese spy, operating right in the heart of the parliamentary network, who's got links to some very senior Conservative MPs. A spy in our midst.
At what level do you think, though? He's sort of an elected representative, or?
Well, we understand he was working for two very senior Conservative MPs. He wouldn't be any point working for Labour because you want people who've got access to the government. MPs who were very sceptical and very critical and hawkish about China. His brief, presumably, was to try and persuade them to be less bellicose.
How have we found out that he existed? I must have missed this over the weekend.
It broke in one of the Sunday papers.
Well, I think there are lots of questions around that. You know, this happened in March, the arrest of this person. Have they been charged?
No, when they're on bail.
When did the Prime Minister know? Yeah. And did it change his foreign policy? Because, of course, just 2 weeks ago, he sent his Foreign Secretary off to China, which is the first time we've seen this softening of the position.
And also Tom Tugendhat, who is a minister, who was a front-runner to be the new Defence Secretary, when Ben Wallace stood down, didn't get the job. It went to Grant Shapps, who knows nothing about defence. Tugendhat was linked to this alleged spy in China through no fault of his own, because he would have employed him because he thought he was an expert on the subject. So maybe that's why Tugendhat didn't get the job, because the Prime Minister would have known about the arrest of this person in March. So it's a very murky story with lots more to unravel.
And that will be unravelling at 9:30.
Well,
Andrew with Bev Turner, thank you very much.
Now, so many of you have been getting in touch after our debate about dangerous dogs. So we'll be showing some of your pictures and emails. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You've all been so good today, and one item that we've been discussing in particular has caught your attention, and that is dangerous dogs. And we're talking about these, what are they called, killer XL bully.
Yes, well, this viral footage that emerged over the weekend, and you might have seen it, of this dog attack, really shocked us. So we thought we'd ask, you know, should they be banned? The Home Secretary saying she thinks enough is enough.
Do we have this footage from Birmingham? No, we don't.
But we do have lots of views. David says, simply implement a law that those dogs should be muzzled while out in public with immediate effect, then bring in a law to ban the breeding and ownership of those dogs. The only time I can see action being taken on this breed of dog is when an MP or a police officer is seriously hurt.
Look, you know, all dogs are capable of biting, but not all dogs are capable of killing. Or is capable of being provoked as easily as these bully dogs, as they're called. And dogs are, by and large, genuinely the most loving, and they've got one instinct which is quite bad when someone rings your doorbell or approaches your path, yeah. And so the amount of Amazon men and delivery people have been scared off from our house, but our dog just literally wouldn't hurt a fly. She's not even...
Don't tell anyone that.
But she's not even nasty in any way, but she does bark from the point of view that she wants to protect us when somebody comes. And I remember my sort of first job of delivering newspapers, and that was really, I mean, and in respect to postmen and women, whatever, as well, because when you go into a dog's territory, they will bite posties' hands when they put them through the letterbox and things like that. But there's a difference being bitten by a dachshund and being bitten by a killer, whatever, XL bully dog. Why would you even call it an XL
Well, exactly.
bully dog?
Just the name implies that the owners want to sort of be
But anyway,
intimidating.
Kev says, I have one of these dogs. He's the dopiest, most obedient dog I've ever owned. It's how you train them and what they're trained for. If you train any dog to be aggressive, it will be. On a lighter note, at least like the cat in your video, they aren't carrying knives.
Good point. Tom's written in with a picture of his two puppies and says these two would lick you to death given the chance, although they aren't XL bully dogs. Meanwhile, Carolyn has written in saying, look at this vintage photograph. Bully breeds have been around for many, many years.
Is that what that is?
Unfairly persecuted. The British Bulldog, that's a bully breed, looked different years ago. Is that now a bully breed? Your comments are not fair. Well, this XL bully dog, an American breed, only arrived in the UK, we were told earlier by an expert, in 2018, so they are new. It doesn't mean all bulldogs are dangerous, but this particular breed is responsible, I think, for 75% of dog attacks and killed one dog a day during the month of July.
I love dogs. I do love dogs. I get all soppy talking about dogs. The most beautiful, wondrous, loving creatures. And even today, before going out to work, she licked me, she kissed me, she nuzzled against me, and then the dog came off.
I knew you were going to do that. Poor Ruth.
If only. Peter says, someone dumped this dog in my garden. It took me 20 whole minutes to stop it growling. Then I managed to feed it some food, and I called the rescuers who took it away. Well, the growling bit's the scary bit, and remember, they all just exist to eat.
Well...
As long as it's not you they want to eat.
This is another story of a dog, a neighbour's dog in their garden. This person doesn't want to be named for reasons that will become apparent. I, unfortunately, have a neighbour who has that breed of dog. The neighbour purchased it as a status symbol to show he's tough. and he deliberately kicks and punches the animal to make it aggressive. Now it's a fully grown XL. The dog is extremely aggressive, and what's more, he has 2 very young children. I reported to the RSPCA months ago they're not interested. The XL's already attacked the children, and the owner walks around with the XL unleashed and smiles as it attacks other dogs and cats. My goodness me, that's why he doesn't want to be named, because his neighbour sounds like a lunatic.
Yeah.
And it gives all dogs a bad name, actually. And dog owners a bad name as well. It's a shame all round if you have to change the rules. But I think it's interesting that Suella Braverman has said enough is enough. How many more children, how many more people have to be bitten, have to be mauled? And some have to.
And also, I think
action.
you know, if you choose a breed of dog, and you shouldn't do that. You should just adopt, not shop. So many dogs need rescuing, and they'll give you so much love back if they are. We don't need these bully dogs. We don't need this breed, so they shouldn't be allowed in the country. Anyway, we're going to be allowed back into the studio tomorrow. We think from 6 a.m. But next it's time for your weather update with Rachel Ayres. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it was a hot weekend, but what does it look like as we go into the new week? Well, there is plenty of brightness across much of England and Wales to start this morning, with any mist, fog and low cloud lifting and breaking. But we are seeing an increase in cloud and outbreaks of rain sinking southeastwards throughout this morning. We might also see the odd heavier shower and thunderstorm developing as we go into this afternoon. Still feeling pleasant in any sunny spells, but those temperatures a fair bit down on what we saw at the weekend, with highs of 27 in the southeast. Now, as we go into this evening, this cloud and rain will continue to make its way southeastwards, becoming heavy in places but also slow moving as it goes into England and Wales. Clearing skies though across Scotland, Northern Ireland and later on across Northern England. So a chilly night to come here, though still humid and remaining warm further south. So as we go into the start of Tuesday, a fairly foggy, humid and murky start to the day for much of England and Wales, with outbreaks of rain spreading southeastwards throughout the day. Plenty of sunshine though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, but starting to feel a fair bit cooler here with those winds coming from a northerly direction. Still just clinging on to some of that warmth there across the southeast, with highs still getting into the low to mid-20s.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Well,
Morning.
Big day. Spy in our midst. Spy in the House of Commons. Will an MP name him? It is a him, we think, under parliamentary privilege. I think so. Spying for China.
Yeah, maybe. We've also, of course, today is 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11. Are we still under threat? Well, that story would suggest that we might be. Don't go anywhere.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson.